And oh, it's going to be a show tonight. Oh, speak of the devil, here he is. Okay, great. Now the party can really start. How you doing, Counterpoints?
Doing well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, your audio's coming through loud and clear. Can't see you yet, but we'll probably fix
I'll
that in a minute.
fix that momentarily.
Okay.
No. You don't turn on a camera. I need support here. I can't be the only one.
The cameras are good.
gonna-
I like cameras.
I'm going to screw you over.
Oh God, I'm gonna be outnumbered.
And as we go, let me kind of introduce the topic here. We're going to be talking about a recent speech that Biden gave, where he called Trump's rhetoric fascistic. He likened it to something you would hear in Nazi Germany. In addition, today, this morning, Trump made the following tweet, and I'll read it briefly. He says this: a president of the United States must have full immunity, without which it would be impossible for him or her to properly function. Any mistake, even if well intended, would be met with an almost certain indictment by the opposing party at term end. Even events that cross the line must fall under a total immunity, or it will be years of trauma trying to determine good from bad. There must be certainty. Yeah, that kind of rhetoric. Is it fascistic? Is it something we should be concerned about? Is it something that Biden was right to point out as fascistic? Or is it crying wolf? Or is he being too harsh? Are we not using these terms correctly? We're going to talk about that, and we've got some great guests to talk about it with. And I want to give each of them a chance to introduce themselves and give a brief thoughts on the rhetoric and Trump's actions. And here we go. We're going to start with someone who is new to my stream, but hopefully he enjoys himself anyway. Rashad, please go ahead. Tell people who you are and tell people your thoughts on the subject.
My name is Rashad Crenshaw. Thanks for having me on. And I believe that Joe Biden is correct about Trump's rhetoric. I think Trump has gotten increasingly more hostile, increasingly more demanding in his sense of immunity from the law. I think Trump has genuinely just crashed all the way out in terms of his perception of where he stands as a president, what he's capable of doing, and what he can't do. So that's just my perception.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Next up, no stranger to my stream, someone who we love to have on because he is just so, he's got this, he's an American, but he's got that Canadian air about him, okay? We have Lactoid. Go ahead. Give us what you got.
What's up, Wick? I think that fascism as a term in American politics has sort of lost its meaning. It's something that one side just calls the other side whenever they get frustrated and whenever they want to compare them to just the worst thing they can think of, which is going to be Hitler or fascism or et cetera, et cetera. Could you potentially link any kind of nationalistic language to be somewhat similar to things that fascists espouse? I'm sure you could. I'm sure there's going to be common themes amongst a number of different political ideologies. But the idea that Trump he's a fascist or that his rhetoric is fascist, I think, is crying wolf. I also think it's ironic that the speech in which Biden you're referring to definitely, like optically, definitely looked pretty fascist, like the red background, the Marines, this sort of down tone where he's standing up there, the central figure. I don't know. It's just kind of it's funny and hypocritical.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. And again, I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Next up, someone who's been on my stream before, but not a lot. Artemis Fowl, please, what do you have for us?
Oh, I'm gonna agree a little bit with Lactoid here. Fascism actually has a definition. It has a structure. It's well documented. You can trace it back to where its lineage comes from. Where it differs from socialism, where it differs from some authoritarian structures. It isn't something you can just modify the definition of. It's like modifying the definition of monarchy, or monarchy or monarchical like tendencies doesn't make sense. So when you use the word around in the common American parlance, it's being used almost entirely incorrectly. And the statement that Trump put out about immunity is just him using his statement to plead his case in front of the Supreme Court, because he's literally going there for delineation on whether or not his immunity stands. So I don't know how that can be utilized as an example of fascism when he's literally on trial. Well, not on trial, but Supreme Court is literally deciding whether or not his immunity stands whether or not he can be prosecuted. So that's just that. I think that's a red herring. I don't think it matters.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. I'm sure we'll get into it. Last but certainly not least, the man with a plan, the one who brings us into the 40K future that we so desperately deserve. Counterpoints. Give us what you got.
Yeah, no, I'm actually happy to hear what Articus Fowl said. I want to get into the nitty-gritty of the definitions because I feel like I've studied this a little bit and hung out with some fascist pals in order to understand the academic side of things. And as a result, I think that you can absolutely argumentatively make the statement that Trump is sympathetic, not even sympathetic. He believes in political corporatism, which is the foundation of fascism, and he's a flexible authoritarian, meaning that he doesn't care about the rules of the republic. So I think that definitionally, he does fit pretty well into the fascist definition, and we should actually, rather than moral frogging about that term, we should probably define that term, define the behaviors that he partakes in that kind of meet up with it, and then determine whether or not that's good or bad. Because the truth is, I think some of his fans like the fact that he's fascistic, and they apologize for it, and they make excuses for it. So if we're going to make excuses for him tonight, I want to be clear about what we're making excuses for.
And there we have it, gang. This is what we think. This is what we are. So I guess let's talk about it a little bit, right? Corporate fashion. What was the term you used?
Political corporatism.
Political corporatism. Yes. Sorry. Right. And also to again referring to the tweet that Artemis said was a red herring. His behavior and his words, at least to a layman, seem to me that he does not care about the actual rules of law or the points of order. He is just wanting power and will do what it takes and say what it takes to get it. Why is that wrong? I'm going to give the floor to Lactoid and Artemis first to say that, and then you guys can respond and we'll open it up. Cool? Go.
You can go ahead, Artemis.
Go for it. If you want to do it first, I don't matter which one. So
I want to address the political corporatism parts from first. But I mean, Wick, if you wanted to talk about the authoritarian tendencies,
go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, what do you mean by political corporatism?
Yeah, if you don't mind, if I'll try to outline what I've been taught, basically. And the things that I would cite to you for this is that Benito Mussolini and Hitler, they've written books. Those books are largely nonsensical and kind of difficult to follow because they just talk about the current events. They don't actually talk about like the structure of the government or the belief system that they want to do. They just hit a whole bunch of culture war talking points of their era. Whereas the philosophical founder of fascism is Giovanni Gentile, who precedes Mussolini. And so the main people that I would cite would be Gentile. I would cite Cultured Thug. I would cite Keith Woods. Cultured Thug and Keith Woods are modern fascist creators at minimum nationalist creators. So political corporatism has nothing to do with corporations. It doesn't have anything to do with the economy. It has to do with the nation state. It has to do with conceptualizing the nation state as a body and defining that body. So you're defining, for instance, the United States of America, we have Hispanic Americans, we got Black Americans, we got white Americans. You got to decide whether or not they're American. And if you do, then that is the corporate body that you have to advocate for. Most nation states actually subscribe to some level of political corporatism, but where it takes on a little bit more of an interesting nuance that's philosophical is the keyword of core is body. So if you have something that is healthy, like a healthy heart, liver, brain, whatever, then it's adding value. Whereas with corporatism, if you have something that's taking away from you, then it's actually a parasite or it's a foreign host. And so there are fascists. The reason why fascism is not definitionally racist, but it oftentimes is because they would look at the Black community and crime and single fatherhood and all that kind of stuff, and they would say, this is a foreign entity. It is not a part of us. The reason why it's not healthy is because it's not a part of our community. They would do the same thing with Jews, where they would say Jews are manipulative and they're parasites and they're cosmopolitan and they're global merchants and all that kind of stuff. That's why they're not a part of our political corporative body, which is why they need to be eliminated from the body, because they're parasites. That's the fascist mindset when it comes to these things. Now, I'll talk about flexible authoritarianism for like 30 seconds, then I'll wrap it up. But with the flexible authoritarianism, fascists do not believe that the conflict in government is inherently negative. They don't view the conflict between personalities and egos and power is inherently negative. They think it's natural. They think it's a natural part of the human experience, and that conflict breeds a higher level of person who is capable of making their will manifested in the world, and that the only real truth is what we can implement in the world. So, as an example, this might seem contradictory, but it's not. In Spain and in Italy, people who sympathize with fascists, they use the monarchy and the church to back their play. That's not because they were actually devout Christians or that they were devout monarchists. It's just because it was the power base that allowed them to gain their own power. Same thing with Nazi Germany. Hitler was elected democratically. He used the democratic mechanism to seize power. It's because it was available to him, and it was capable of giving him power. My final argument before I wrap up is that I don't think Trump gives two flying about the Republic. I don't think he cares about the Bill of Rights. I don't think he cares about the Constitution. I don't think he cares about republicanism philosophically. I don't think he cares about Burkean conservatism philosophically. I think he cares about the corporative body, which is the United States of America, and he cares about his own power.
Response?
All right. Do you want to go, Lactoid, or do you want me to?
I wrote a lot down.
Okay, you can go for it first. I'll cover whatever you haven't addressed.
Sure. So starting with the first topic, you reference a couple writers, and then what it essentially sounds like is you're referring to political corporatism as whenever you identify different segments of your population, and then try to identify perhaps issues and problems that they have as foreign or not American, I suppose, and as opposed to just wrapping up all the problems of all the different demographics or groups that you have in a country as the American problem. I don't think that Trump, unless he can point to something very specific, I don't think Trump's has a history of doing this with the Black community or Jews or any of those groups. I think you could absolutely point to the fact that he's more hawkish on immigration, so illegal immigrants. I guess my question for you is, given the definition that you put forward, since illegal immigrants are in the country, and he's saying that what they're doing is being like an un-American thing by illegally immigrating, would you consider his rhetoric and him being against illegal immigration, is that also part of political corporatism?
It's a part of political corporatism, but you don't have to identify certain in-groups and out-groups as being hostile. So for instance, like in Italy, there's like 5 or 6 different ethnicities. There's like the Lombards and the Sicilians and the, Roman Italians and the Etruscans and all that kind of shit. And they all have like blood feuds stretching back millennia. And they all view themselves as more or less Italian. Well, if I remember correctly, Benito Mussolini was like, no, we are all Italian. We are all part of the same corporative body. So put your tribalism aside. We are the same thing. And I think Trump does the same thing with America. I don't think he specifically isolates the Black community, although he might talk shit about him sometime. I don't think that he specifically isolates Jews. As a matter of fact, I think he's pretty friendly to Jews. But I still think that the political corporatist vision of, and by the way, like I don't have a personal beef with political corporatism. It's actually the flexible authoritarianism that I have more of a beef with.
I'm trying to hit the definitions here because I'm a little bit confused now because so you're saying that actually political corporatism is not identifying certain demographics within your country and their problems as being un-American. You're saying that actually having a conception of the nation state and unifying everybody within America, this is part of political corporatism.
You can do it either way, and I want to give you an example. So let's say that we talk about let's say, just as an example, it could be a little bit racist, but just follow me.
If I may, can we just do you have an example where Trump has done this? Can you point out just to kind of circumvent this route here and show us an example of Trump doing what you're about to make an example of, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think political corporatism oftentimes is synonymous with nationalism, and I actually don't have a problem with political corporatism conceptually. Make America great again. America is the greatest country on earth. All these people are coming from shitholes. They're polluting our blood. They're sending their worst people. They're sending their rapists and their murderers and their drug dealers and their fentanyl and the China virus and all that kind of stuff. All of this rhetoric is designed to enforce a in-group and an out-group. The in-group is obviously the United States of America, and the out-group is obviously anybody who isn't us.
I can actually just help you with this to make it a lot easier for your argument. Trump's dialogue against journalists would probably be the easiest one you can point to.
Sure.
If you want to go there, you can probably do that where he claims that they're the enemy of the people.
Yeah.
Right?
So if
Well,
you were
this-
and
this
if you were
doesn't
to
make any sense
analogize
now.
this,
Hold on,
Sorry, go ahead.
Lactoid. There's a point why I'm saying this because I'm about to bring up something else that's going to immediately invalidate it. So keep going. Counterpoints.
yeah, so I was going to say what Trump's argument would be is if you're to accept the corporative or the body analogy for political corporatism, then what Trump would argue is that the press is like they used to be a healthy part of the American body, but now they're cancerous. They're like leukemia. They turned against their own host. They're trying to destroy the politically corporative body. And so as a result, Trump is like, he's like chemotherapy. He's going to drain the swamp. He's going to purge the unclean. He's going to get rid of all, you know, you can probably envision all the rhetoric I'm talking about.
Yeah, I want to give also the mic to Rashad for a few minutes as well and get him in on this and ask him a few examples of
Dude,
Trump's
before we jump off of the journalist thing, I'm just going to cover it real quick.
Okay, very briefly, but
it'll
then I
be
want
about
to
30
after you do,
seconds.
just real quick.
It's about
after you cover that, I want to toss the mic to Rashad and let him give some examples and maybe lay out his case a little bit. Go ahead.
The reason why the journalist thing, even though it is a rhetoric that he uses, is irrelevant, is because even though Trump had this rhetoric that they were the enemy of the people or whatever, right? He did far less than Obama did when Obama was imprisoning people with unlimited detentions and basically torturing journalists and whistleblowers. So when we're talking about fascist tendencies, I don't really give a shit that he's saying that they're the enemy of the people when we have people that actually go out of their way and do the fascist thing that people complain about. Or think
I think there's just real quick, I think there's a huge argument to be made that since 9/11, the increasing emphasis on the executive branch since Bush has enabled this to happen in the first place. And the checks and balances of the republic have been slowly degraded over the past 20 or 30 years.
Eisenhower.
Okay, I'm very confused as again, I'm a little bit confused. So you brought up examples of, where Trump is doing this, America first, MAGA, things like this, where it's like kind of identifying America as the polity that comes first, right? Would you then, when Biden says something like, I represent all Americans, we need to have American unity, do you think that's like part of political corporatism?
Yeah. He's identifying his in-group and his out-group. Political corporatism, I know that like whenever people talk about fascism, everybody gets a little jumpy, but political corporatism itself is not an inherently evil conception. And as a matter of fact, if you look at nation states throughout history, political corporatism is largely like the subconscious conception of nation states since they were first created.
Yeah, if this is, I'm assuming this is just like you said, nationalism. And since it is, I'm just going to repeat what I said, which is there's going to be elements of like similarity between any kind of nationalist rhetoric and perhaps any kind of fascist rhetoric, regardless of who's saying it. You have in the very speech, Biden talking about the MAGA Republicans being the sort of cancer to excise. I don't know if he uses the exact words, but that's definitely the implication. So, I mean, I guess you could draw comparisons there as well. If this is just like an extremity test, I mean, do you think that Trump is anywhere close to the type of historical figures that we normally think about when we think of fascist? When you think about like Benito Mussolini or Hitler, do you think Trump is anywhere near them? Because I would say he's not anywhere close.
I know Rashad needs to get in, but I think he's a lamer version of Napoleon and Julius Caesar.
All right, Rashad, you're up, man.
Rashad, why? What's the difference when Biden says we're all Americans, right? We need to get rid of our extremists. What's the difference between that and what Trump does? Go.
I think Trump is just a little bit too caught up in the us versus them on a domestic level, and also on a foreign policy level, he's really aggressive. So, for example, Biden saying, I represent the American people, that's my first and foremost, responsibility or whatever the case might be. Trump wouldn't be wrong for saying the exact same thing, but he's also obsessed with this showcasing of like aggression and, strength in terms of foreign policy that oftentimes does remind you of a fascistic leader, right? If you look at how he handled, NATO nations not necessarily paying as much as they were supposed to in terms of their GDP towards their defense budget, that wasn't a wrong thing to be upset about, right? If I'm coming in and I'm looking at what's going on, I'm like, yo, like y'all are tripping right now. Like, why aren't you, doing what you're supposed to be doing to make sure that the alliance as a whole is strong? Trump basically publicly shits on them, which if I'm, Putin or Xi or anyone else watching from a distance, I'm like, oh, look at this shit. Look at it. Look at it. They're beefing. Now now they've got issues with each other. It's an amazing showcase of individual strength of like, I can stand up in front of these world leaders. I was a former businessman. I just popped in and now I'm talking my shit. But on a foreign policy level, all of our enemies are looking at it like, oh my God, you couldn't make this up. He gets in and the first thing he does is antagonize and embarrass them. And I think that Trump's obsession with this showcasing of strength as it pertains to America first, it is a lot more risky and a lot more chaotic than Joe Biden's, in my opinion.
I have a question, Rashad, about that.
Sure.
So when we're talking about Trump's bravado or madman on the button with the button, right? Because that's what a lot of people frame it as.
Yeah.
You also admit that Trump wasn't wrong about the fact that NATO countries were not actually putting money into.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
So my question is, if fascism, how we're trying to understand it, how we're describing it in this modern day and age, isn't something that is inherently wrong, because that's what I'm hearing, is that there are things that can be fascist and be okay. I don't necessarily understand. Yes, exactly. Well, there's Singapore is going to be an example of fascism that's liberal because it doesn't allow political party competing at all. But the answer is, when we're talking about fascism as a negative aspect and how it's detrimental to democracy, we're really wanting to know what the actual impacts Trump has that is fascistic, not the things that can be explained away by just natural politicking in a different form.
I think
I can hit this.
Yeah, I'll let you both go, but I think one of the greatest examples of this would be, and I hate to bring this up, January 6th is a great example of where that turns into kind of a really impactful threat to the democracy type of deal. But I want Rashad and Counter to weigh in. Go ahead.
Well, we can bring it back to domestic policy, which I think would be a lot more, effective in communicating his, fascistic tendencies. If we look at like Schedule F, I don't know if you guys have heard about that one, but the plan that Donald Trump was trying to implement at the end of his term, which would basically strip job protections from career officials and policy roles throughout like the bureaucracy and make it a lot easier for the president to just fire like civil servants. You get like a Russia situation where you find people who aren't necessarily qualified but are loyal to the leader finding themselves in really important positions that should be filled by someone who has a genuine desire for that field, has been in there for decades, has worked with multiple administrations. That's what you want. But, if Schedule F were to work as probably intended, and I mean, as Wick mentioned before, Trump's tweeting about how the president should be immune from this and immune from that. And he's basically asking for the country to be his own company where you're fired. And it's like, well, when you leave, we have to pick up the pieces of whatever mess you make with this sort of like businessman running of the nation. So being able to just fire people from different parts of the executive branch, it's just not safe for our country. We need people who have stood the test of time, stood the test of administrations, who are experienced. And I think trying to implement Schedule F is a prime example of this authoritarian aspect of fascism, where it's just, I'm in this bitch, I do what I want, I run the show, and if you even seem slightly unloyal to me, I don't give a damn about how much you've done, what you know, what you've experienced, what you offer to the country. If it's you versus me, you're out. Fuck whatever happens to the country as a result. So that's a domestic policy example. It wasn't implemented, but it was planned.
I have a question about that. But if anybody else has any points they want to bring up, let me know.
Yeah, so I do want to bring this up because I think the easiest one to bring up is the transfer of power. It's 100% the most obvious thing, because we can talk about Obama authoritarian policies, we can talk about Bush authoritarian policies, we can talk about all the crazy shit like the, I don't know, fucking COINTELPRO or whatever. We can talk about general American authoritarianism, but what each one of those, if you want to call them the Uni Party or Globo Homo or whatever, each one of those people still deferred to the Republic, to the peaceful transfer of power, to the courts in a lot of respects. And as a result, they still played by the game of the Republic and deferred their power to the higher authority. Whereas when it comes to Trump in particular, if you listen to the January 6 hearings, he actually his two top attorneys general at the DOJ said, hey, all the fraud that you're alleging, we looked into it. It's bullshit. It will not change the election. You need to step down and transfer power. Trump says, hey, I don't like that answer. So I'm thinking about firing both of you, promoting someone who's like 18th down in the DOJ, who has no criminal prosecution experience, to the position of attorney general. This is like 3 weeks before January 6th, by the way. He's going to draft a letter saying that the federal government is still investigating fraud in all of the key states that I won. And then we're going to have Mike Pence either declare me the winner because of the fraud, void out and send it back to the states. And we're also going to have fake electors show up on the day of January 6th in order to confuse the vote to make sure that I can maintain power. So what you have is you have somebody knowingly trying to defeat the peaceful transfer of power, and he does not care about the truth of the matter. That is somebody who does not care about the republic, who does not care about the process of law, does not care about the the distribution of power. He only cares about his own power, which is definitionally flexible authoritarianism.
So I have a question for that.
Sure.
So if we have an election where one side wins, and the outgoing president starts manipulating, trying to find allies to try to sabotage the incoming presidency, trying to deny a peaceful transition of power, trying to use the levers of government to try to make sure that the incoming president is either fucked over or is hampered in some way, right? By like legal or prosecution or whatever, right? You would say that would be a form of fascism. We're denying the peaceful transfer of power. I don't know how that, with the way that Trump did it, is like the same thing that happened with Trump and Biden is the same thing that happened with the Obama administration with Hillary Clinton and the Crossfire Hurricane shit, where it fucked over his president. It is literally, the FBI knew that the shit was made up for 2 years, and they still investigated and hampered his fucking presidency. That is not a peaceful transfer of power. They intentionally went after him and sabotaged his administration.
This is going to be hard for me to peel apart because I'm more sympathetic to Trump and Republicans being pissed off about Peter Strzok and Crossfire Hurricane and the way the investigation was conducted, where it was a presumption of guilt, the basically like the fudged FISA warrants, like all that kind of stuff. You're speaking my language. I get called a fucking conspiracy theorist by Destiny and
all this stuff came out of the Durham report. Yeah, it agrees with you.
Sure. The thing that I would cite as the meaningful difference between these two things is that the spirit of the law might have been violated in a few cases, but the letter of the we could argue about that.
They falsified evidence.
Look,
that person got convicted.
The big difference is, in one case they were trying to make it harder for someone to govern. In the other case, they were trying to steal the election. And these are not the same. And where both might be bad, right? I'm not going to deny that. Both are not good, right? One is infinitely worse. We cannot flatten these things. We cannot continue to flatten these things to be exactly the same. They're not.
Because they're not.
Yeah. To be clear, the intent was to get Trump to be impeached and removed from office with that investigation.
Or ineffective. But hold on. So here's my thing, though. I don't know, because we're acting in the age of information, right? We have cell phones, we got data banks, all this information is infinitely more available. We don't have information.
The post-truth era.
we also don't have information gatekeepers like we used to. So back in like the 1970s and 80s or whatever, I think there were like 3 or 4 major TV news stations and maybe like a dozen major newspapers. So my suspicion is that what you're talking about, where a Democratic administration tries to knowingly fuck over a Republican administration, or vice versa, through judicial and legalistic fuckery, I almost wonder if this was happening the entire
All the time?
time.
Yeah.
Like for instance, Nixon comes to mind with the Whitewater, or what was it? Was it Watergate? Watergate.
Yeah, Watergate.
Watergate.
With
Whitewater was
Watergate, yeah, where he was trying to break into, the DNC headquarters in order to get information. And even though they didn't obtain that much damning information and Nixon wasn't heavily involved in the planning of the burglary, he was still so obsessed with maintaining his own I don't know, stance on power, he ended up involving himself in the attempt to cover it up. So for me, that's a question of like, has this shit always been going on? But I don't think you can find me another American example of a president trying to nullify the entirety of the election. I don't think there's another historical example.
Well, that is a fair statement. That is a novel instance. But when we're looking at the fact is that Trump is hyper paranoid because he realized. Oh, sorry. I'll actually let Lactoid go if you raised your hand. I don't.
If you're in the middle of a
Finish
sentence,
your thought. Finish your thought.
Okay.
And like
I would say
you,
it's
Artemis,
you're
I
too
can
quiet. Are
moderate.
you Canadian?
Yeah, I don't need help on this.
Me?
No.
No. I promised Lactoid that I would be reasonable when I'm on his show.
When I'm on my show. Wow. Okay. All right.
Lactoid.
Yeah.
I guess you're up.
I just had some responses written down. So, in terms of his foreign policy kind of stature, and I don't deny that he does tend to, I guess, use aggressive rhetoric sometimes. Now, there's other times which the rhetoric actually doesn't appear to be all that aggressive. I think specifically, like with Ukraine. If we're talking about like a fascist, somebody who's like obsessed with the idea of an expansion of a nation state, you can say that supporting Ukraine is a good thing for other reasons, but I don't think you can deny that it absolutely serves like America's imperial interests to add a country like Ukraine into their collection of satellites, which is essentially what will happen if Ukraine is successful. And so Trump openly stating that he is basically going to cut off Ukraine from funding, try to negotiate some kind of settlement, some type of agreement. I think this is a major, this is antithetical to fascism, and this is like a major talking point considering how big of a deal the Ukraine war is. Referring to the stripping the job protections, I think those job protections.
Hold on. If you have a thought on this, Rashad, just elbow your way in. If you want to address this point particularly, go ahead.
I'm taking notes right now.
I told you, Rashad, go for it, man. Gotta go for the throat.
No, I mean, I wanted you to finish up your point on the
geopolitical,
the job protection.
Yeah, job protection.
Yeah. So for me, when you're looking at ending job protections, I don't think this is not inherent. I don't think this is inherently fascist, right? So job protections essentially serve to provide a certain position protection from scrutiny by the people, right, through the election of the presidency. So if it's in the service of maintaining the separation of power, such as with the Supreme Court, I can see that being useful, right? You want to keep the Supreme Court insulated from the will of the people to some extent, because their job is not to necessarily represent the will of power. That's the will of the people. That's the point of that specific branch of government. However, when we're referring to this specific schedule, which strips job protections from federal employees, specifically those under federal agencies, aka executive agencies, this is fully within the executive branch. So it's not necessarily bleeding on into any of the separation of powers issues that I have. And really, how I look at it is because it's not doing that, it just simply makes the federal government more accountable to the people, as opposed to how potentially it is or will be if the job protections are strengthened, which is less accountable to the people, right? It's a government that is or a government made up of people who are insulated from being removed by the people. So I don't think that it's all that clear cut that removing job protections within your branch is fascist.
Okay. So the first thing you spoke about was his interactions with, I believe, NATO as it pertains to the foreign policy. I would consider it fascistic because if we look at just the way he comes out and the way he interacts with them, it's a reflection of where he's moving as a president, right? So when we look at the impeachment as it pertains to trying to withhold money from Ukraine in exchange for dirt on Joe Biden, right? It becomes like, okay, well, you don't want to support Ukraine. You want to make a peace deal with Ukraine and Russia. Where's that coming from? Is that coming from a genuine assessment of the situation? Or are you still tight about the fact that you tried to run this scheme and it didn't work and you ended up with an impeachment situation behind it? How do we know your foreign policy is rooted in an actual like analysis of the situation and not some personal grievance, because we know you're capable of a lot of slimy shit as it pertains to domestic and foreign policy. So it's like, how do we know this is rooted from a president being a president and not someone, moving with this authoritarian, I run the show, it's my plan, fuck the world if it comes to it? How do we differentiate? And I know that that's not necessarily like the most logical, factual, hard-based assessment, but if I'm looking at it from a neutral standpoint, I can't really look at how Trump has moved foreign policy wise, especially as it pertains to Ukraine, particularly, or at least solely on that, and say that's, not possibly, overlapping with fascism. When we also look at the whole Schedule F situation, it's like, sure, his powers wouldn't overlap into other branches of the government, but competence is an extremely important part of any government running successfully. I mean, if we look at Russia, we look at a nation like Russia, 1 million winter uniforms go missing. How's that possible? As someone who joined the army, I got issued my uniform when I was in reception. There was no way it could go missing. It was given to me. Like, I had it. How the fuck do 1 million winter uniforms go missing? That's not possible without you, the leader of the nation, probably appointing different people into positions of power who are more probably, dedicated toward being loyal to you, making sure that as it pertains to, the powers that be, things run smoothly, more so than does every recruit have the uniform they fucking need. And when we start engaging in this sort of, fascism where a president has authoritarian control and can just move anybody anywhere and fire anybody, you end up with a nation where 1 million fucking winter uniforms go missing. It blows my mind.
To contest this, Schedule F is actually a good remedy, because the entirety of the Afghanistan occupation for 20 years, the entirety of the military brass has been lying to the executive up and down the chain, saying that the Afghanistan army or police or whatever was far more competent and far more existing than it actually was. Where on paper there was a sizable force, and in reality they either didn't show up, didn't exist, or the amount of funding that was supposed to go to them never reached them. So when we're talking about people in competence,
I want to.
But competency doesn't matter as to whether or not it's fascism.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to address his thing.
It can, because fascism kind of lines up with nepotism and cronyism. But
yeah. But the issue is that the United States military-industrial complex is nothing but cronyism and capitalism. So having Schedule F to remove these fucking incompetent people that are just there to get a paycheck and agree with the military-industrial complex is not a bad thing, and it's not fascistic.
Wait, do you think? Hold on, quick. Do you guys think it'd be more or less fascist if a rule was put in place that the president couldn't fire generals or remove generals in the military?
That would be.
But didn't fire?
Yeah, can't get rid of generals. Like, there's an established entrenched group of generals that gets to basically be a general.
I would say less.
You would think it's less fascistic?
Yeah, absolutely. Because basically what you would want to do is you would want to have them be congressional appointees, or you would want to have some kind of balance of power appointment system, instead of, if you just say he can hire and fire whoever he wants whenever he wants, then he can just hire and fire simps at all times.
Just to make clarity, are you saying that there's this group of generals that can never be fired by anyone, or they can never be fired by the president? Because there's a difference, right?
Yeah,
if you're saying that they're going to be appointed for life, like the Supreme Court and their generals, then I have some issues. But if you're saying, hey, the executive branch is not allowed to just willy-nilly fire these guys, they have to get a congressional approval, and it has to go through a process, I don't think that's fascistic. I think that's much less fascistic. So it depends on what
I think.
So I disagree with that. I think that would agree. I think
same.
I think it's more fascistic, because civilian control of the military is one of the greatest differentiations between a more authoritarian country or a less authoritarian country, right? This is the reason why military juntas, right, when they gain power and they take over an entire area, it's because they have tremendous amounts of institutional control and leadership that they're able to exert control that exceeds the civilian capability to restrain it. And if
Well,
you
what
had
kind of
like
equality are you
if
talking
you had
about?
like union job protections for the military, if you had union job protections for the heads of these governments, like that are comparable with this, I mean, you're essentially putting like having the people elect a president that is the civilian government that doesn't have control of the military.
Yeah, we said give it to Congress.
What do you think the
that
Congress
just
is
makes
if
it a
not the
political.
Congress
civilian
is
government?
also
Here's the problem.
civilians.
Here's the problem,
Go
though, is
ahead.
it like saying that it's not fascistic. It's like the problem is that like I think Trump is kind of showing holes in the game that we didn't think were possible, right? Normally, presidents weren't that big of a threat to the proper functioning and competence of a military. But when you look at like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, like vehicles improperly fueled because soldiers are selling them, like competence is from the top down. And when a guy can fire any general and replace him with a crony who might not be as experienced or as knowledgeable, and his only, defining trait is I'm loyal to Trump and I'm a ride or die behind my boy Trump. That's not actually effective for this country. It would probably be best if people who it could be either Congress or it could be people within the Department of Defense that can properly allocate, okay, this general should be fired, this person should be fired, that person should be hired. But for the president at any point in time to just fire them willy-nilly and say you're gone, especially with a guy like Donald Trump, I don't
Oh,
see
you don't
how
want to
that.
bomb these people that I want you to bomb? You're gone. You're fired.
Do,
Yeah,
do you guys
so-
think that the existence of the president itself is fascistic?
No.
So my,
Why not?
So, sorry, go ahead.
Because it's
What,
not
what,
flexible.
what, what should the president have the power to? What should the
No, hold
president
on, hold
have
on.
the power to do?
I want to address
You're
this.
a lot
I want to
further-
address this
you're taking a
specifically.
lot.
Yeah, I want to address this specifically, and then I want to go back to Ukraine actually. So the reason why the office of the president is not fascistic, no matter what fucking Twitter commies say, is because there is, as a matter of fact, the office of the president is one of the least fascistic executive positions ever created. Reason being, because there's term limits, there's a plan for a peaceful transfer of power, there's balance of power between multiple branches, and there's limits to his authority that he can be impeached and potentially criminally charged for. So, do you have any rebuttals to that?
No, I do. I know. Hold on. I do.
Balances
I'm not. So you're talking about the American government generally. I'm talking specifically with the executive branch because you're saying, well, Congress should just be able to fire them. Can you name me one power that would be that you could just like give to Congress from the president, or that would make it more fascistic? I mean, it seems like anything that you give the president under this kind of theory of like, well, we should just give the power to hire and fire everybody away from the president, give that to Congress. I mean, what in your mind, what can the president do that would be more or less fascistic?
So let me kind of tell you my worst case scenario, and this is where you kind of build. You have to war game politics for if the worst, most malevolent motherfucker seizes power. Right? That's how you have to war game this shit. So the reason why I disagree with you guys about whether or not the president should have sole power to hire and fire generals is actually, you said that the generals were lying to the civilians about how Afghanistan was going.
No,
It was
Syria. Well, both actually. Yes, you're right.
So it was known in the military for decades. I knew that the Afghan war was lost in 2011, and we still stayed for that long. And basically, it was a running joke in Vice News that they're like, this is what winning looks like. I think it came out in like 2016, where they showed like the Afghan army wildly incompetent, wildly corrupt, everything's stolen, nothing's laying down, half the people are high on heroin, et cetera, et cetera. I think the civilians knew what was going on in Afghanistan. They just wanted the general to say that at press conferences because they didn't want the American public to really know that we dumped 2,000 lives and $2 trillion into Afghanistan with nothing to show for it. So I don't think that has anything to do with the military. Sorry, real quick. Let me just finish this one point. So with the generals, though, what I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want the generals to give bad news to the president where like Trump is like, hey, Waziristan is kind of a pain in the ass. Let's go ahead and hit it with nukes. Let's just glass that entire part of the planet. And the first series of the generals are like, hey, that's a bad idea. Pakistan's a nuclear power. Afghanistan is a destable country. We don't want to glass these people. And then he's like, okay, well, I have the power to hire and fire. So fuck you, you're fired. Find me the next guy who will do exactly what I want. And that's a kind of incompetence you can expect from an authoritarian dictator.
That wasn't my question, though.
If I may, I know you want to respond.
Well, that's why it's more
I'm
fascistic.
going to let you respond, Lightfoot. but I want to put a pin in this because I want to bring this back to the reality and not the hypothetical. Trump has said that on day one, he is going to seek out his political enemies to attack. So if we are talking about a man who says things like this, right, and we have every reason to believe he will do this, right, and to give him the power that Schedule F would give him, what do you think he would use this for? Because we can't take these things out of context of who is advocating for them and who is wanting to use them. What do you think a man who said, I'm going to seek out, whether it be civil, criminal, we don't care, we're going to find a way to get you if we can. What do you think that kind of person would do? Lactoid, go ahead. You can respond to the counter and then you can...
Yeah, I want to respond to... Yeah, so the question again was, what powers could the president retain that if we gave it to Congress wouldn't make America less fascistic, right? Because when I think about it, you could make the argument that the president being the commander in chief, that's more fascistic than if only Congress had the ability to deploy forces. Hiring and firing agencies. Well, we could take that away from the president. And before you know it, the president can do nothing. Let's just abolish the office of the presidency and be less fascist and give everything to Congress.
Yeah, so let me actually address this head on. The reason why is because a certain amount of centralization of power and vision is needed in order to be effective. And so this is actually the reason why Congress exists in order to legislate and the executive branch exists in order to execute. And so the whole vision behind this is like the reason why the president of the United States, his most important job is the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces, is because he needs to act during moments of crisis. So we defer those powers to him because we don't... let's say that a dirty bomb goes off in New York and it kills, I don't know, like 500,000 people or some shit. We don't want to have Congress debating about our response for 2 years after the fact, and then by the time they decide to do something, the perpetrators are long gone. We want an executive to take over after the crisis, create a vision for what we're going to do, and then respond accordingly. Now, the problem with that is, of course, when you have this concession of unlimited power to the president to do whatever the fuck he wants, which is basically what we had in the War on Terror.
Yeah. Well, this is totally fair. This is totally fair. Last thing, this is totally fair. I would just argue that, and hopefully you would agree with this, unions, in this case, which is removing the job protections, in this case, provided by federal workers' unions, I think you would agree that these job protections probably would make workers on average be less efficient. And since we both agree with efficiency, removing them isn't necessarily fascistic. It could just be trying to optimize the federal branch.
No, like Javier Milei or whatever. I think like he's hyper liberalized the government sector in Argentina or whatever. I don't think he's a fucking fascist. I think he's like an anti-government institutionalist. Yes. Now, if Javier Milei said, hey guys, the reason why I'm eliminating broad swaths of the federal government is because I want to retain power. I actually have a son who I want to run after me, and his son is already born. So we're going to keep the Milei dynasty in power for the next 30 years because I fired everybody who opposes me. Then I would say that he's a fascist.
I got a question here. So you're saying that having the president the ability to unilaterally fire a general is fascistic, right?
I mean, potentially, of course, not necessarily.
So for a great real world example, what was one of the biggest controversies in the Korean War?
MacArthur wanting to fucking nuke all of North Korea.
Okay, and then what stopped MacArthur from doing so?
Getting fired.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was well known that was a thing and why we have that ability.
But we can't take again.
Sure.
We're talking about. I want to bring this back. We're talking about.
Yeah, sorry. I just had to make sure that was.
Yeah, we're talking about.
A reason
what was it? Project F. Yes. What was the thing, Rashad? You called
Schedule F.
Schedule F.
Schedule F.
Yeah, we're talking about the Schedule F proposal, which would be granting those powers to do this to anyone within the executive branch's purview. Right?
Yes.
Do you not? Can I ask, just out of curiosity, do you not see any issues with that at all?
So there's Rashad, if you want to talk now, I'll let you do it. If not, I'm going to go ahead. But I know you haven't been able to speak a lot because
you can. I mean, obviously, I want to like bring it back to like, is Trump, is rhetoric or is his behavior fascist? But I mean, of course, you keep going.
Okay, so the reason why Schedule F isn't fascist in the way you think it is because Trump isn't there to put more power into the state or more power into himself. He wants to dissolve the FBI and the ATF and move their funding and their people and spread them out into the other agencies or entities or institutions, and decentralize a juggernaut that's immortal with infinite power and money that can just fuck you up from anywhere. So he thinks that is a corrupt entity and that it is beyond reform. Schedule F is what he wants to do, is restore some type of faith in the system that a lot of people think is corrupt. That's what he wants to do.
Okay, I mean, when we look at the root of where that motivation is coming from, I mean, this is the same guy that allegedly, according to James Comey, asked James Comey to be loyal to him, right? So we got an acting seated president basically like asking the FBI director and like a high-ranking member of the Department of Justice to basically be loyal to him and to give Mike Flynn a pass.
Yeah, I would rebuttal.
My thing is, where is the motivation for Schedule F coming from? When we start talking about, is Trump fascist? Is his rhetoric fascist?
His rivals.
Where is the motivation for these kinds of decisions coming from when we look at the battles he's been through? Like even him saying, oh yeah, on day one, he was joking, but it was a joke coming from a real place. Like, this is a man fighting multiple legal battles. This is a guy who basically told the feds, I do what the hell I want with these documents. Y'all ain't getting shit. This is a guy, when you look at his motivations and the behavior he's been involved in, we have to bring it into context, right?
Yeah.
Why is he trying to do Schedule F? When we look at his relationship with the Department of Justice, it's clear like he's got real beef with these, institutions. And obviously he's going to do whatever he can to decentralize these institutions, to break them apart, to move this person there and move that person there. And y'all, it's all,
By the way, y'all can make arguments for why what he's doing is good, right? Sure. Like Hitler was a fucking vegan or some shit, He also drank water, and I'm pretty sure he was a fan of public transport. You can make arguments for why certain policies the Napoleonic system. He was like wildly influential in standardizing French education and making sure that the French were like a literate society. Now, he also invaded shitloads of Europe and got millions of people killed, but the lycée system that he instituted was obviously positive. So you can say like, hey, I personally think that the FBI and, these other three-letter agencies are beyond redemption, and therefore I like it when Trump said, I think he's the only person with enough balls to stand up to this corner of the establishment and rip it apart. But I'm still going to tell you that when you look at it is a colossus. Our federal government is a colossus. A lot of those institutions exist for a reason, and a lot of the vilification of them is flowery and bullshit compared to their actual institutional function.
So, you could almost call it a Leviathan, perhaps. Right?
Yes, you could. Sorry, I was looking for that.
No, it's fine. And this is the reason I push back against a lot of lefties who say, "Oh, why doesn't Biden do something about Roe v. Wade? He should just do an executive order and override all the branches of the government in order to implement our will."
Later,
is because it's not something a democracy does. You don't just get to, even if what you want to do is good, even if what you want to do is a great good, you don't get just to overrule everything and say, I am the boss and you are going to follow my rules. He's not a king. And I think, in a really real sense, and I'll let you respond, Lactoid, I promise, that Trump wants to be king. Just straight up.
I think this is the best argument, actually, for... I was hoping that someone would bring up Roe v. Wade. I think this is a great argument. I think one of the least fascist things that Trump did were the Supreme Court justices that he appointed, right? And that's going to be the most enduring legacy of the Trump presidency, and will be. And the type of justices that Trump appointed and will appoint because of the ideology that he comes from are going to be originalist justices. And originalist justices are the antithesis of fascism, while the justices that tend to come from people like Obama or Biden are not that, right? They tend to be hyper fixated on getting specific political goals done at the expense of judicial, of law, of judicial history, of legislative intent, of all these things. Democracy be damned. We're going to fucking legalize abortion because fuck you. That is the left-wing legal way of thinking. The biggest legacy of Donald Trump is the least fascist thing that he's like, that's probably happened, which is
you
having
could
a
be
court
right.
like this.
Okay, you could be right. And by the way, I don't know everybody's political persuasion here, but the way that I identify personally is I am a Republican. I care about the Republic, and I am a Burkean conservative. I've read about Edmund Burke. I think he has a fundamental understanding of politics that is fantastic, and I wish that more people knew about him. Now, what you said is wildly important. That the conservatives are originalists. They're looking to the intent of the law, the way that it was written, approved by the people at the time. And if the law is going to be changed, then it needs to be changed through the legislative process. Therefore, this kicks the can back to the legislature, where if you have a whole bunch of pissed off Americans who are like, why the fuck are we following these stupid bullshit laws? Then they pressure their representatives to pass legislation. This is important in a republic, and we've gotten our humors, we've gotten our political corporative mix out of whack by deferring to progressive justices and the executive branch. You and I wildly agree on this. Yeah. However, there's a huge caveat here. I don't think this is going to happen, but it's just possible because a lot of shit that I didn't think was going to happen has happened. If the conservatives and conservative justices, instead of doing their constitutional duty to interpret the original legislation and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as accurately as they believe it was intended to be when written, and instead they rewrite the laws to simp for Trump, then I will think that he has effectively destroyed the Republic, not saved it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to explain how you.
Yeah,
think
what would example?
The simping for
situation.
So let's say that the Supreme Court, with the immunity argument, okay, almost every government official has something called sovereign immunity, or what's the other one that everybody fucking hates? Come on, help me out. Qualified immunity. Okay. And sovereign immunity and qualified immunity, I'm sure there's nuances to it. I'm sure a lawyer could just, articulate it to me. Qualified immunity only applies to civil cases. Sovereign immunity sometimes applies to other things. But the whole point of it is, if you do your job as prescribed with good faith, then you can use that to either avoid prosecution by the government or use it as an asserted defense while being prosecuted. Yeah. Okay. So this is why Nixon was impeached, but probably could eventually have been charged with conspiracy after the fact in order to cover up a felony or whatever fucking charge applies, right? Yeah. Trump is saying that he can never be criminally charged ever for any of his conduct conducted while president of the United States. That is bullshit. So if the justices agree that the president of the United States can walk down the street, Fifth Avenue, I think Trump mentioned, and shoot somebody in the fucking head, and he simply can't be prosecuted because he is the president of the United States, I would view that as a dissolution of the republic.
I will come in here real quick, if you don't mind. If Trump is president and he does shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and
for fun,
yeah, sure. But the issue is the next step in that is not prosecution by some devolved court system.
That's probably impeachment.
He has to be impeached. You can be impeached for offenses after you leave office as well.
But if he isn't, so my question here to you, Artemis, if he isn't, for whatever reason, impeached, like they play politics with it, they say, we're not going to impeach this guy for this. You think that the criminal courts should have no bearing, even though he says it, I did it and I liked it, there's video evidence, it's just incontrovertible proof that this is what happened, and he says, you're not going to impeach me because you're too scared to do it, and look at it, everyone's too scared to impeach him. The criminal courts will have no power in that case?
Hey, so to be clear, if you're already at the point where your civilization is already split so far politically that one side will not convict somebody for outright murder, impeach somebody for outright murder and convict them in the Senate, your country doesn't deserve to fucking exist.
Okay, so hold on, right here, all right? So I wouldn't view, if the Supreme Court says that he needs to be impeached first, I wouldn't view that as like a dissolution of the republic. I would I would say that they're coming up with a checks and balances system in order to make sure that the office of the president isn't prosecutable for any crime. Because we would probably, let's be honest, let's take this to the extreme. We would have the jurisdiction of San Francisco trying to try George Bush in a California court for torture during the War on Terror, right? That's what would happen.
This is brought up in the Federalist Papers exactly for this. which is why the unlimited ability to pardon people was brought up in the Federalist Papers as can he be impeached or attacked or prosecuted for pardoning somebody who used bribery and fraud to get him elected in the first place? Can he do this? The answer was yes. He should be allowed. The president should be allowed to do that. That was, I think, Adams brought up that argument that is a sovereign power, and that the only way to remove a president is to impeach them for their conduct.
Yeah, no one's arguing the president is immune from prosecution, regardless.
Totally.
Right? Even his own lawyers argue that you'd have to impeach him first for that.
Yeah,
and then you could go after him.
Nobody's
Which is fine. I'm sure it was clip chimp to where they're like, well, we think that he could murder somebody and he would get off totally scot-free. I'm sure that was clip chimp.
They did a qualified yes thing, which was incorporated the impeachment thing.
I'm sure that the way that it went out was as a headline, right?
Yeah.
But the point still being that if the court said no, even with impeachment, the office of the president of the United States must be given full sovereign power to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and even with impeachment, he still can't be criminally prosecuted, then I would view that as he got those justices into their position. They're returning the favor, and as a result, we now effectively have a conservative authoritarian oligarchy or
here's
whatever.
A caveat. Here's a rebuttal to that. If they do decide that is the case and that stands, that gives Biden full power to just abuse the shit out of everybody. I mean,
sure.
that is a ultimatum that they're not going to do, because
I agree with you. Probabilistically, that's not where we're at. It's just I didn't think Trump was going to win in the first place. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of have to caveat everything I say.
Does anyone think that Trump is going to listen to the courts if they disagree with them enough, though? Right? Like,
it doesn't matter.
If the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court orders something, I mean, I would agree that if the Supreme Court orders a very specific thing to happen, and he says no, fuck you, now we have major problems. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna clip that, pin that, because I'm gonna look. I promise you, we're gonna be playing this clip again.
That's fine. That's fine. I've not only said that. I not only say that now, but I've said it when I argued with Pisco about the Colorado case and how I think that is a problem, and I think that's somewhat politically motivated. But when we're talking, I do. But
I agree.
I almost think a little bit, Connor, you're doing the thing that you and I both agreed on was a bad thing. We're just like, if they rule this way that I don't like, that's the end. Well, isn't really the only question, let's say they do rule that Trump is immune, but they actually do a full historical analysis, right? The foundation of sovereign immunity comes from a time in which monarchy was the prevailing government. And the concept of the monarch being prosecuted was completely absent from the ideas of political framers, because the monarch was considered the country. How can the country prosecute itself? So in an American context, the president is considered the country through the people, right? We the people. That's what that actually originally means. Maybe they come to some kind of conclusion that that's the reason why you can't be prosecuted. Then that's a good decision. That's an originalist decision.
Then I would need another qualification. So for instance, let's just add, you brought up how we could inch towards what I would hate and view as the death of the Republic. Let me just add one more variable. Let's say that they said that during the 1944 or 48, whatever the fuck, the guy who ran for fucking 3 terms and got approved or whatever, and then we went down to 2 terms.
FDR.
Let's just say they were like, hey, term limits through this, that, the other mumbo jumbo is actually unconstitutional based off of XYZ reason. Therefore, Trump can not only be elected in perpetuity, he actually doesn't have to run for election again for whatever quasi fucking thing. I would need to see a translation so far in departure from the intents of a republic that I would basically say these people, they just care about clout. They just care about power. They don't care about the republic. And as a result, the republic is dead. And then one of the things that I would say, one of the things that heartens me about the American Republic actually is the oath that both domestic and DOD personnel take. It's not to the president of the United States. They don't take an oath of, it's to the Constitution of the fucking United States of America. Now, not everybody knows those words or believes those words or whatever, but I still think it would be a tall order for the Supreme Court to declare Trump dictator for life and for the military to just go along with it.
Okay. Well, let me give pause, brief intermission, read some super chats, and then I have a question for the group, and maybe we can get on this track and see where it goes. I'm liking this discussion so far. We've gone to different places, but I'm enjoying it. Pondering politics for $20. Excited for Crenshaw. Connor, Lactoid, and Artemis are all pricks, but I love them anyway. Biden 2024. Trump's fascist Star Wars is greater than 40K. $5
Fuck you,
from Pepper Hash. Take this money. Thank you. And $20 from Running Joke to say, thanks, Wick, for these streams. Loving it. Well, I love your money, so thank you for giving it to me. Question, though, for all of you. Regardless of these court questions or these hypotheticals, I got a hypothetical for you. It's looking, after the Iowa caucus, more and more likely that Trump is going to be the 2024 nominee for the Republican Party this coming election cycle. If he loses in 2024, do we think he'll accept that? Do we think he'll just say, okay, no, I lost, it's good? I want you all to be honest. Do we think that there is any way that he just accepts it and moves on?
No. So here's the big
Depends
thing,
how
right?
bad he loses.
So regardless of whether or not he accepts it, right? He has no power to do anything because he doesn't have any legitimacy or control of anything. So accepting it is irrelevant, other than it matches up with his personality type.
Not irrelevant at all.
He did a lot during 2020, right? Like he did a lot, or 2021, I should say.
While as the president of the United States,
6th, that was a lot.
As president of the United States, yes, he did a lot as the president of the United States, I guess. The issue is I don't think president.
He won't have enough he won't have enough institutional power to effectively do anything. He would still have his legal courts, he would still have his criminal prosecutions, he would still have all that headache. And it's not like again, the FBI and the United States military and the National Guard are not going to be all like, we love Trump so much that we're going to take to the streets and kill our neighbors for him. Like, I know that we like to pretend that like so for instance, the entire argument is whether or not Trump is fascistic. I think that he is a poor copy of Napoleon and Julius Caesar, because Julius Caesar and Napoleon both commanded armies and actually had enough like clout and oligarchical support in order to seize power. Donald Trump he's like not even our richest billionaire. He's just like a really funny guy who is a billionaire who is more puff than substance.
If I got a question for everybody here. If Trump was more intelligent in the way he spoke, do you think we would be even having these discussions?
No, it's not just his language, it's also his behavior, right? Like the things he's done, like when January 6th is going on, he's making calls like, you really should think about, doing what I want you to do, as these people who probably want to kill you are outside. Like his actions are also crazy, even if we just get rid of the shit he said. So would you
bro, hold up. No, I want to take this in a different direction. I don't think he would appeal to the common man the way he does if he talked like a fucking lab coat. Like Nikki Haley or whatever. I am a nerd, okay? I like 14-letter words. I like complex concepts. I like all that shit. I fucking doze out a little bit when Nikki starts talking about policy for too long.
She looks like a Hillary Clinton.
Well, I want to give Rashad some chance to elaborate on what he's saying.
Yeah, go for it.
So when you talk about fascistic actions, can you give us some more examples, please?
I mean, another example would be the classified document situation where, this guy's not even president and he's still like trapped in this delusion of, he literally says word for word, they're mine. They're my documents. And it's like, why is it that you think? So Joe Biden in his camp, they find documents, return them. Mike Pence, I believe, also returned them. It's not even the fact that he had them that's the problem. It's the fact that he's like, well, they're mine. Like, as of right now, they're mine. I run the show, they're mine. And it's like, you should probably return those because they belong to the state. They're matters of national security. They're not your personal belongings. And yet, even though he's not even in the office, he still has this perception of, I'm in charge, I run the show, I'm above the law, and if you come take these documents from me, you violated my rights, more so than me violating the trust of the American people as a former president, hoarding documents and doing everything in my power to basically give the feds the stiffest NFL arm you could possibly give while running with the ball. I just think that's another example of his fascist behavior, where it's like he thinks, like, it's the authoritarian aspect of fascism that he embodies so well, where it's like, I am basically God.
Yeah. Do you know a lot about the National Archives and the FBI like investigation into that?
I don't know a whole bunch. No. So if you know more,
I'm sure counterpoints will probably correct me if I'm wrong here, but back when the National Archives first approached Trump about missing documents or documents they thought that he had, the FBI had already approached them, and they started a long diatribe between their fucking representatives. And the first initial encounter ended with the FBI, with the FBI locking, telling Trump's attorneys or whatever to lock up and secure these fucking documents. And then a long preamble of more fucking jostling with the fucking vampires that are the attorneys, and the FBI ensued for another year. A different FBI team came in from the National Archives and just took everything. Like, they had enough and they just took it all.
Okay.
So there was no attempt from Trump to give any sort of runaround with the FBI.
No, there was.
That's what the attorneys are there for, is to give people the runaround.
But you know that's you. Okay, but here's the thing, is we have to talk about intent here and the actions, and what I consistently hear from not just y'all but some other people or whatever is like, we point the finger at somebody else who is doing shit that's bad. Like, so for instance, they'll point to Biden, who had like some unsecured documents or whatever. They'll point to Obama or Hillary Clinton or whatever. But typically, I'm not saying this is true, I'm saying this is the story, is that fucking Biden forgot that he had that shit. They say, hey, you got that shit, give it to us. He gives it over. Whereas with Trump, he's taking fucking secure documents to meetings with reporters, and he's like, hey, I'm not supposed to have this shit. I could have declassified this before I left, but I didn't. Isn't that funny? Tee hee hoo hoo. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Which is like, literally, it's like a Bond villain fucking speech. It's fucking crazy. So
here's the issue that's going on.
Intent matters here.
So the issue that's going on with the classified documents court case at the moment is that there's a dubious claim by Trump. I say dubious because I'm reading it from factcheck.org. That's how they frame it. Is that Trump had a standing order that any documents he took from the White House and took home were automatically declassified.
Yeah, and then this gets shitty with Obama, because like Obama had. Well, hold on. Obama allegedly, okay, bear in mind this is like a 6-month-old or a year-old drama that I'm fucking repeating ad hoc, right? But the Obama, his administration set up a declassification regimen because they did find that there was a bunch of classified documents just fucking floating around, and they were also freaked out by the Hillary Clinton server issue, right? Yeah. So they basically like set up standards for declassification that they wanted to follow. The only problem being that it's executive. So if you have an executive setting standards for declassification that another executive doesn't follow, then does the second executive get his fucking shit pushed in because he didn't follow a procedural directive of the executive branch, of which he is the head, right? Correct. So this is like, for me, this is kind of like lab coat shit, like nerd shit. I wouldn't get, if I was a lawyer with this, I would fucking kill myself before the case started, because I wouldn't give a flying fuck about the way that it proceeded. Okay. However, that being said, I still think Rashad's point stands that it's a variable showing that Trump doesn't care about the process. He just wants to do what he wants to do. And if you're in his way, he'll tell you to go fuck yourself. Now, people like that as a part of his personality, but obviously that's going to lend itself more to an authoritarian style of governance.
But does that make him fascist? That's the problem. Does that in and of itself?
Authoritarianism is an aspect of fascism, isn't it?
Yeah, but everything is an aspect of fascism because we could pull it from different types of governments. The issue is, does a fascist tendency make fascism?
But to the extent that Trump is stretching it, wouldn't that at some point become fascist?
So what I would say, this is one of the key words that I would say with I always say flexible authoritarianism. I say political corporatism and flexible authoritarianism. And the reason why is because flexible changes depending on the environment. If the FBI backed Trump, he would be best boys with them. They'd be playing golf together. They'd be hanging out. He'd be talking about how they were the best thing since sliced bread, all that kind of bullshit. The example that I would use for you is like evangelical Christianity. Hearing Trump mispronounce words in the Bible that 6-year-olds know how to fucking pronounce was hysterical. And
Correct.
he's like fucking 4 times divorced, cheating on his pregnant wife, billionaire who gives a shit about like gaudy things. He fucking like he pepper sprays an entire crowd so he can do a photo op in front of a fucking church. This isn't Christian behavior, but he holds up the symbols of Christianity to gain power. So that's what I'm saying is he's not when you're like, oh, well, he's not authoritarian in all circumstances. Most intelligent fascists are not authoritarian in all circumstances. They're kind to their friends and they're cruel to their enemies, and they know which is which and what will give them power.
I have a question here. If a person is having these flexible authoritarianism against an entity and it results that the entity is found to later on have been engaging in fascism itself, does the person that was engaging in flexible authoritarian be fascist?
So getting specific, maybe I'm mind reading. Are you thinking of Crossfire Hurricane while you're saying this?
Nope. I'm talking about the fact that the FBI is currently putting people on lists for buying Bibles and talking about Christianity. That just came out.
Okay, can I yeah. So we're fighting fire with fire. So what I would say is that damn, so my anti-government fucking instinct.
I understand.
It's fighting
question.
both at the same time. But here's the thing. So I'm going to use Crossfire Hurricane as an example because it's one that I'm more familiar with versus the one that you just used. Okay, so within Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI, when it has the allegation of a crime, there's not technically any like legal prohibition on them opening up an investigation on flimsy evidence. Now it's fucked up. It's kind of immoral. It's kind of unethical. It's motivated, right?
The only question is whether or not they intentionally knew that the information was false in the FISA documents that they were signing.
Which in the lies of omission, which would have collapsed 2 of the FISA warrants, and the lies of commission, which was the first one. Yeah, it would have ruined like 30% of the case.
It would have actually probably never had the Crossfire Hurricane go through, unfortunately. Because the entire thing was under the...
Okay, this is almost like, I don't need to get into the nitty and gritty of this.
Yeah, keep going.
Let's talk about let's talk about the philosophy of it.
Let's keep it moving.
Yeah, so if we're talking about the philosophy of it, if the federal government prosecuted a case that was unethical and parts of it were illegal, but the parties that broke the law were punished, then they're still following or attempting to follow a series of codes of conduct and legal distinctions that they're living up to as a part of the republic. Whereas what I would say, what separates that from Trump is fundamentally he doesn't give a fuck about the rules in the first place.
Okay. But can something that is
do we disagree with that statement? That Trump
so here's the issue with that, right? That'd be a mind reading thing that I don't think I could quite do, but I can understand it because Trump's personality that we see kind of lends to it. The problem is that Trump is under a concept of victim mentality because he thinks that he's under attack by the establishment. And so de facto, all of his things are going to be self-justified because of his experiences with those entities.
I mean, that sounds like a valid excuse for why he has fascistic tendencies. That might be totally reasonable, right?
Well, and can I point out something that's a little bit just like how we wished our leaders did conduct themselves? I'm pretty sure when it comes to George W. Bush, there was some ruling that basically didn't go his way. I forget what it was specifically, but it did go up to the Supreme Court. It was after the election. It might have been no child left behind or some shit like that. Or it could have been like some Iraq war thing. I fucking forget. But something goes up to the Supreme Court and it gets shot down against Bush. And basically the reporters ask him like, hey, are you going to try again? Are you going to ignore the courts? Are you going to assert executive authority, et cetera, et cetera? And Bush, like literally, he just stares right in the camera and he's like, no. Like the courts ruled on this topic and they said, no, we're going to abide by the beliefs of the court. For me, that's an executive who knows his role within the republic, who's trying to respect the rule of law. Whereas I'm assuming if Trump was asked the same question, he would call the Supreme Court a bunch of F slurs and then say, nah, I'm going to try to figure out a way to do it because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
So you do remember the rent moratorium during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And you remember the Supreme Court decision that said that they can't do it under X reasons, and then Biden said, well, we're going to do it again, and they're probably going to destroy it, but we're going to get it for another 2 months.
Same thing
Sure.
with the student loan forgiveness.
Correct. So we have a guy who literally does the things that you're saying would be fascistic, is an actual example of trying to go
If it
around
was
the Supreme Court.
see, if it was providing for his own power, well, actually, you actually have
is.
an interesting argument here.
It
Yeah.
does.
I was gonna say because then he can go to the people and say, "Hey, I got you that extra 60 days of no rent
Correct.
and
This is
that
why
extra
it's
60
tricky.
days."
why
Sure.
it's tricky.
No, actually, so what's interesting is I agree with you here that action is fascistic because when you talk about Julius Caesar or whatever, that's
Mhm.
actually the way that he seized power.
bread
Was
and
he was
circuses,
popular with the plebeians, bread and circus. He was like, "I'll get you bread. I'll guarantee the trade. I'll
Mhm.
secure the frontier. I'll do this. I'll do that." And so all the nobles fucking hated him, but Julius Caesar, he appealed to the
But
plebs.
isn't it about time and intensity, right? Like, so we can all
Sure.
acknowledge that every single person in power has probably done something that's pretty authoritarian at some point or
Mhm.
another. That's fine. But it's the constant and just intensity of it all over and over again. So no, once or twice. If Trump had made this statement that he did today about being immune in a vacuum,
Mhm.
okay, fair enough, right? But these
It's
are things that
consistent
aren't
behavior.
happening in a vacuum, right?
So my question here would be
I
to
don't have a problem with the statement.
Yeah. So here's my issue with yours, Wick. What is the coverage, positive or negative, by all of the mainstream media towards Trump's presidency?
You say all of the mainstream media.
Correct,
Towards,
because they did
80% of it.
sure,
95% is negative, overwhelmingly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you and everything that when Trump farted wrong or dumped food into a koi fish pond that they thought was done incorrectly, they torched that man on
Sure.
television and made it front line news. Are you mistaking the attempt of pushing something in your face constantly 100% of the time for something that is more prevalent than it was before?
So I understand the argument.
During when Obama was in when the media fell asleep.
I understand what you're saying. I'm saying that no. I am saying that is not the case, right? That if
Can
you
I-
look at Trump's rhetoric and actions, they are by far and away they were done more intensely and more often than Obama or
Yeah. So
Bush. or-
I want to come your way a little bit though, because I think that the real frustration that Trump is tapping into, that I think even like Bernie Democrats would agree with, is that it seems like we have a mainstream media that is in cahoots and rubbing elbows with our political class. We have the political and the media class who are rubbing elbows with the oligarchical financial class and the military industrial complex. And then as a result, it doesn't feel like we're a nation of pure citizens acting in a national interest. Instead, we are the plebeians at the whim of the oligarchical overlords of the establishment.
Can you
Now here's
before you go on, can you tell me what was the first time the media overwhelmingly declared Trump acting presidential?
Oh, when he bombed someplace else.
When he bombed Syria.
When he killed the general. Yeah, when he killed the Iranian general.
Actually, when he bombed the
oh yeah, the fucking
thing. Yeah,
the Russian airbase or whatever.
Yeah, he bombed the airbase, and all of the media stopped calling him the Satan incarnate.
This was the real. This was the real president. Sure. So here's the thing that I think is really interesting, and I really appreciate the good faith conversation tonight because I always try to thread the needle on this topic. America is not a nation state that advocates in its nation's interest. It is the cornerstone of a $65 trillion global commercial empire that cares about its own perpetuation. So the reason why we're advocating for Ukraine is not because the United States and Ukraine have a bilateral, long storied relationship. It's because we are trying to add, I think you said it, like another feather in our cap, another, jewel to our crown of the commercial empire. And so what I would say is that this is a real problem. And the real problem is the fact that this feels like a runaway train. It runs up a lot of debt. It has a lot of military expenditure. it makes us a lot of enemies. And if we fuck up the debt or fuck up our military response too much, then we could get fucked hard.
Yeah.
Like, Russia doesn't seem like they can fuck us, but maybe China in another 50 to 100 years could. And maybe people would choose China because we've overstepped the bounds of empire too much for our reign as the global hegemon.
Yeah, I want to hear
But-
Rashad get in on this after you finish up. 'cause,
Sure. But what I would say is part of the Roman Republic could have been saved and restored by people who cared about it. And instead, they handed the Republic to a bunch of dictators, and what happened was an ever-increasing fall, where the fall of the Roman Republic, when you had a good emperor, things were awesome, and when you had a bad emperor, everything fell to shit. And that was just the boom and bust cycle of the Roman Empire until its total fucking collapse. And so what I'm trying to say to Republicans, people who care about the Republic, I'm trying to say 2,000 years ago, they did this. In France in the 18th or 19th century, they did this, and it came with disaster. So don't turn the Republic over to a dictator. We have to restore the Republic.
Okay, Rashad, you're being given space to kind of get in on this and what your thoughts. And if you disagree with Counter, that's perfectly okay too, as well.
or me, or anybody
Or
here.
I'm not sure what Artemis was gonna ask specifically, or is were you gonna ask something specifically, or what? Or
No. So so one of the big things is that we have a person who's used to streaming, who's very able to carry a conversation. Some people tend to follow the wayside that may have good points or ideas or things they want to say that they just can't find the time to come in. So I wanted to make sure that you're new here. I don't want
I
you to
promise
be
you,
able
Artemis, this is annoying me. I can moderate. I promise you. Okay, you don't need to. I can do it.
no, I mean, I guess we're talking about the general topic again, right? We're falling back to like the main topic, I guess.
Yep.
I mean, I think you mentioned something about, the media shitting on Trump. I think Trump is unprecedented in his kind of just like, I guess, foolery. I mean, I don't think there's been any president that's kind of done things the way he's done things and acted the way he's acted. And it does create an interesting situation where his supporters can't help but feel like, yo, what the fuck? Like, y'all are bullying our guy. You guys are shitting on him constantly. You guys won't give him any room to breathe or even be human. And it creates a situation where, in spite of Trump actually fucking up multiple times and doing the wrong thing, there's this kind of weird energy where, like, his supporters don't see that. Instead, they see the ultimate witch hunt, case after case after case, media situation after media situation. So I think that Trump is definitely doing a great job of masking, I think, his fascistic behavior with how big of a shit the media took on him from literally day one, before he'd even really fucked up yet. He's doing a pretty good job of, I guess
Oh, and
playing the game. No, you got it.
Yeah, this.
go ahead. Nobody knows what fascism is, by the way. Like, nobody understands Gentile. Nobody will talk to Keith Woods. Nobody will talk to Cultured Thug. Nobody will fucking read Hitler because he's long and boring and fucking erratic. Nobody will read Mussolini because he's fucking schizophrenic. Like, and this is the problem. If you talk to anybody left of George Bush, then they're going to cite to you Umberto Eco's 14 points, which, by the way, almost every country on the planet meets like 7 to 12 of the 14 points to some degree.
The early warnings of fascism, that fucking sign, like everybody
is a nation state existing.
No. That was a fucking memorabilia from a fucking shop that you can go buy. It was never anything other than some company put it out there for people to buy it. It was not a legitimate thing. People just ran with it because they could shit on Trump with it.
Right. And so anybody to the left of Bush uses 14 points. It's nonsensical. And then I had to like explain political corporatism for like 8 fucking minutes because it's kind of a complex thing to understand. And also the way people use it, it makes even less sense. But people are calling Vosh a fascist on Twitter right now.
Yeah, we're doing us no favors, right? Like, I would.
So this word and concept is obliterated.
Yes. This is what I said. This is what I said at the beginning. Like, it's a rhetorical weapon, right? The reason why the conversation this is titled is Trump's rhetoric fascist, as opposed to is Trump rhetoric's nationalist, right? Because
we go
all the arguments thus far have been like, here's why it's nationalist, therefore, ergo facto, it's fucking fascist, right? Because nationalism is a critical
Yeah, I
element
gotta
of
get people to click on my stream, buddy.
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Well,
But I'm
I
a
understand, I understand, but the
nationalist.
reason why people are so interested to click on that is because that
Yeah.
word is inflammatory, and you're just simply
But-
highlighting one of the elements of fascism, and then
It's
relating
loaded.
that to yeah, of course it's loaded. It would be very similar. It would be very similar, and I'm sure I've done this. I'm sure plenty of people have done it, where it's like, somebody argues for the minimum wage, and the response is, "You fucking Soviet." Like, this is communist
Right.
bullshit. You're a fucking Soviet.
No, I
now,
don't disagree.
is there a connection there? Like, did the Soviet? Yeah, I could like draw some connections, I suppose. But like, is it really Soviet? If we're being truly honest here,
I don't disagree. If I may, just real quick, I don't disagree with anything you guys are saying about the term is overused, is obliterated, etc. But I think a lot of people use that as a shield or a cover to hide behind, and they will engage in overtly authoritarian, fascistic behavior and say, "Oh no, you're just calling me that," and everyone calls everyone that. I think anti-Zionist and Zionism has gotten the same treatment where people just say, "Oh, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just an anti-Zionist," and that's been used as a shield and a cover to protect a lot of people from saying some yikesy shit. I think that's what's happening here. If the house is on fire, it's not overreacting to say that the house is on fire. We aren't crying wolf if the wolf is actually at the door. And I think when it comes to Trump, that there are enough signs that the wolf is out the door, that he's howling. He's howling out there. He's saying, he's not being coy. He's saying exactly what he'll do, exactly what he wants. And it's a problem. And yes, is it technically the academic definition of fascism? Oh man. Well, I don't know.
Well, hold on. I want to address that. Rashad, go, but I absolutely want to address this.
I mean, I think we're at a stage at a point in time where it's like it's kind of obvious. I mean, we can run the defense of, well, everyone uses the word fascist and you just throw it around. But I mean, him saying that he will root out the communist, Marxist, fascist, and radical left thugs that live within the confines of our country. We go beyond nationalism to like now we're focusing more on the inside. It's no longer nationalism. It's more like, hey, like, I have this ideology and you who opposes it, I will destroy you. Like, what does that mean? I'm going to root out the communist, Marxist, fascist, and radical left thugs. It's like, are we talking like that language there from the president of the United States? I do think is not only unprecedented, but it does live within the realm of fascism. And to say that it's nationalism, I mean, this is a guy that said immigration is poisoning the blood of our country. Immigration from where specifically? Probably like Latin America, Asia, Africa. Poisoning the blood of our country. The only nationalism I could think of in that context would be ethnic or racial nationalism. So either way, we're coming to a presidential candidate that, in my opinion, is really just in the worst possible spheres of ideological thought. But
yeah, so I want to address this before we lose it. So you kind of brought up that like we keep talking about like nationalism, and we keep using examples of hyper nationalism as why we're arguing that Trump is fascistic or whatever. I actually don't have a beef with nationalism. I don't even have a beef with like American militarism. I don't have a beef with the American hegemony. I don't even have a beef with the concept of political corporatism. I like corporatism. And what I mean by that is if you see that a certain segment of the society is doing poorly, like let's just say, no offense to anybody, but let's just say like the black community was ailing because of like the socioeconomic conditions that they had, then I would say a corporative analysis could say, we need to heal that part of our body. We need to take care of it. We need to nurture it. We need to feed it the right things in order to get it back to its health. I think corporatism can be a wildly powerful analysis of society. It's literally only flexible authoritarianism that I care about. That is the only thing I care about. So commies and leftoids and all that kind of shit, they'll indict fascism and political corporatism as all of it's bad because they hate nationalism. They want like international, globo, homo, Star Trek, fucking post-luxury, gay space communism. I don't want that shit. I want America to be badass. I want it to be a strong nation. I want the people here to get taken care of. I just don't want to sacrifice the republic for the cult of one man.
So this is difficult because we would have to get into like literally every single thing. Like we'd have to get into the weeds of the fucking confidential documents or the Georgia phone call or et cetera, et cetera. but I think especially the Georgia phone call, I think is evidence of this.
I think
Where
that case is blown up at this point.
I think
Talking about the Fulton County.
I'm talking about the one where where the one fucking sentence.
I need
clip of, like,
11,718 votes.
Yeah, that clip where the entire rest of the phone call, where he's specifically referring to what he believes are illegal votes or stuffed ballots. Those ones, that phone call that was clipped, where that specific clip was put on the main. Yes, that's.
See, I listened. I listened to the whole thing, and I don't agree with you, but I want to listen.
I'm going to go back to the.
I listened to the full thing.
Of talking thing.
So maybe this might not apply to you then, okay? Because I think I listened to the full thing and it changed my opinion. I think a lot of people did change their opinion after listening to the full thing. And I, you guys are. I think there's a little bit of catastrophizing that's going on here, where these things are being kind of emphasized and blown up and put in the spotlight, and it's sort of like creating this vision of somebody who's going to be who's clearly a fascist. When I look at all the actions like on an individual level. Sure, some of them seem definitely petty, and a lot of them seem to be, you could even argue, incompetent, right? But the only reason I'm pushing back against the phrase of fascism is because this word, we've all been called fascists here, I'm sure, but this word specifically,
fascist enabler, sir. I don't think I've ever been called fascist.
I argued against taxation, then I was called a fascist, right? This has happened to me multiple times, and so the reason why I'm arguing against this word is. This is somewhat of a dog whistle, right? Like, when this person's a fascist, right? What I believe this is like an indication this person is an enemy of like our political agenda, the left-wing political agenda, right?
But I think
categorize this person as this.
Taken kind of justify that argument enough. Like, what is your counterpoint to, after everything we've listed? What is your counterpoint to say, like, he's not a fascist, not because it's this hot word we're using now, but he's not a fascist because everything you guys have listed is just not fascistic. Or...
Yeah, I want to.
Yeah,
quick point, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah.
I think the Republic showed itself to be strong enough that it will survive Trump. I think even if he gets elected again, he'll be in there for 4 years, and then the government will force him out, even if he doesn't want to go for whatever cringe fucking reason he comes up with. That being said, that does not mean that Trump doesn't want to be that guy. He's just not that guy.
Okay. I would look. I understand like the argument, and I make the same argument that yes, the guardrails held strong, but that's no reason to give the keys to the guy at the same time to try again, right? To break through. Yes, when he first tried to run his car off the road and drive us through in the ditch, the guardrails stopped him. Let's not let him try again. I don't know. Go ahead, Artemis.
We will see. When asked, will you allow a peaceful, transfer of power? He said, I don't know. We will see. That's just like,
that's fucked up.
Like, that's absolutely.
That's fucked up.
That is
like Obama or even a foreign policy cowboy like Bush. Yeah. Like, I can't foresee anyone else being like, we'll see.
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna point out two things. One, Trump constantly infuriates the media, so they would give him coverage, and he does this all the time. They always fall for it. Even if he doesn't mean it, he still says some inflammatory shit to make the news. And that has helped him win elections before. He's not going to stop doing that because he's a businessman. That's just part of his personality. So when we're talking about Trump's actions and how they reflect in his words, I'm going to go back to what fascism is from Benito Mussolini, the concept of all within the state, nothing outside the state, and nothing against the state. Everything Trump has done has been to go up against the state.
Hold on. Sorry. If you want to continue, but I have a rebuttal for that.
Okay. So when we're talking about the Schedule F thing, where he wants to just fucking demolish the FBI, he wants to reduce the powers of the National Security Council, of all these fucking career politicians that are unaccountable to anybody. Because they are not elected, they can't really get rid of them. They're almost invisible to the fucking populace. That isn't a fascist move, because the concept of fascism is to centralize power to the state and then force other people to do what he thinks is best.
Yeah,
with everything in his career as president has been to either not use the military to stop outright insurrection in the Chaz.
But for what reason, though?
Well,
he wasn't
he
allowed
did.
to. He absolutely wanted to stomp the shit out of
Yeah,
that.
but he doesn't. Well, to be fair, he could have, because they declared autonomous zone, which is secession from a union. He could have pulled that. He also could have stopped the fire bombings of courthouses in Portland, and didn't. He could have deployed the military against Pelosi, Bowser, and everybody else's recommendations, but he didn't. He always seems to defer his
I don't think that's
other
didn't.
people.
Yeah, I don't think that's didn't. I think you're right that he deferred control to other people. And so, for instance, there were people, I'm sure, who told him that, like, hey, Chaz is a 3-block radius of fucking dirty hippies fucking planting plants on top of like garbage bags in the middle of the fucking thing. They're gonna murder each other within a few months. Just let it out, let it burn it out. Which, by the way, was the right decision, because if you reenacted, there was that college campus in Vietnam where the National Guard shot a bunch of rioting students. If you reenacted that scene, then you would effectively have like a huge backlash. Whereas what happened was the Chaz people, they shot a black teenager and then it fucking dissipated because
multiple people died.
Multiple people died.
They had a warlord. They had a quote unquote warlord.
The Chaz security forces. The Chaz security forces killed a teenager.
Yeah.
So the anyways. So you're asking if Trump is like, I forget the exact ones that you said, but like everything within the state, nothing outside the state, and everything and nothing against the state.
Yes.
Right. So this actually goes back to the foreign policy as well. Mm-hmm. So what I think Trump believes consciously or subconsciously, what a lot of his followers believe consciously or subconsciously, even what I believe consciously or subconsciously, is you said state. And so state is supposed to be a representative of the nation and the nation's people. And that is not what the United States government does. It represents the economic and social and cultural interest of the $65 trillion economic pie of the globe it's carved up for itself.
Yeah, and then
we pass out fucking condoms to Pakistanis and fucking sub-Saharan Africans, and we promote liberalism in like Kuwait and Qatar and fucking give them McDonald's and all this fucking crazy shit. We put a Starbucks on every fucking corner.
The United States Nobel Peace Prizes to presidents who bomb and blow up kids in the Middle East.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we run the Nobel Peace Prize Association, but anyways, the point being that the state is not effectively the United States of America. It's this, globo homo liberal, perpetual deep state uniparty monster that rules the globe. And so when you see isolationism now, I think that's based, actually. I like liberalism. I like republicanism. I like militarism. I like America. I like McDonald's. I like Starbucks. I like, Pakistani people not throwing acid in little girls' faces who go to school. I think all that's based. Mm-hmm. But you have to sign up for like a level of military adventurism in the American project that most people as American citizens did not sign up for. Right. They did not volunteer this. This was not passed by Congress. This wasn't a public conversation. Nobody said, hey guys, after World War II, we realized authoritarian communism was a little bit fucked up. So we're going to be the world police forever. And we're never going to declare war on a nation state ever again, but we're going to deploy our military forces across the world to kill anybody who stands in our way. Nobody signed up for that shit.
Here's a creative question, if you don't mind, Wick.
Sure.
Without the president, and the president just being a revolving door of whoever, is the country known as the United States fascist?
No.
No.
I see it a little bit differently.
I think it's a republic.
Than Connor here. When you talk about the state, right? And nothing outside the state, everything for the state, nothing against the state. Trump sees himself as the state, right? That when he thinks of the state, he doesn't think of the United States. He thinks of Trump. He thinks of the Trump brand, the Trump himself, his family, his interests, and all his actions, right? Every single one of his actions has been exactly that. Everything for Trump, nothing outside of Trump, and nothing against Trump.
Against Trump. Yes. No. Okay. So hold on. But this is beautiful because I would like you to expand your vision just a little bit. His grace and love and mercy and forgiveness and diplomacy is for people within his tribe, people who have pledged allegiance, who are a part of the MAGA movement.
He's loyal to you.
if you will wear a red hat and a MAGA hat and fly an American flag and say Trump is the best thing to happen to this country since sliced bread, you are America. And if you're somebody who stands against him, then you're a fucking commie sympathizing pinko anti-American piece of shit who's trying to usher in the death of America. Yes. And you're fucking against him and all this bullshit, and you can go fuck yourself and you should basically die.
And we will prosecute you civilly or criminally. It doesn't matter what it takes, right?
To the extent that is within his power. And by the way, I think that Republicans are in a particularly difficult spot because 55% of the Republican Party prefers Trump over every other candidate because they are so sick of the globo homo liberal hegemonic order or whatever that they would like somebody to stand up to that order and either bring it to heel or destroy it.
I think they're actually preferring somebody that isn't a politician that is insane enough to do exactly what they say they're going to do. Mm-hmm. The biggest issue with Trump was that people didn't think he would do half the shit that he said he was going to try to do. He attempted every one of them.
Which is the insane part. Right. So you actually saw where I was going to go with this. I was going to say there are people who are riding that popularity, but they're only doing it insofar as they can achieve positions of power. And then they make a dichotomy choice when they get there. They're either a part of the institution and the globo homo international hegemon, and then therefore they will go with Trump's agenda that is good for that political persuasion, but then they'll fight tooth and nail to mute Trump's efforts otherwise. Or you're a Trump sycophant, at which point you advocate in his interest and his interest alone, whatever that is, depending on the day.
Okay. So the issue here is that you're forgetting why Trump was voted in the first place. He was voted in not because he was a genius and politician. He was voted in to fuck up the United States government that kept fucking over its people. And that sentiment has only grown. Like his popularity for the first time is above his opponent in an election, in the general election. So you're going to have to make the case that the rest of the United States sees him as a fascist, when obviously he's, for some reason, gaining support from places that he would have not had before. So
obviously not going to see him that way, but it doesn't change the fact that he is in that realm, unless you're arguing that their belief of him being fascist changes the facts.
Right. And let me lose all my goodwill with whatever lefties are fucking watching me right now. This is why I identify as a Republican and not a Democrat. The root word of Democrat is demos or democracy, which means of the people. Like the Democrat, the Republicans, they represent the republic. They believe in the rule of law. They believe in representatives who represent the people in order to advocate in their best interests. Democrats believe in the unified body of people advocating for their interest, using the state, but also sometimes against the state because they're representing the demos, not the powerful. I think the demos are fucking retarded. I think they're I think they're lemmings. I think that if you have a powerful person dangling the fucking keys in front of their face, they will follow that person to the ends of the fucking earth. So when you say like, hey, it's your job to educate the rest of the American people that like Trump is actually a fascist, I don't even really want to do that because that'll work for centrists and leftoids. So maybe I'll have that conversation. But for rightoids, I just want to point out that he's fucking incompetent and he's bad for America.
I think the main hurdle that people are going to have is that when majority of the people are supporting what some people would colloquially call a fascist, you're going to have to explain to them why he is a fascist and why it's bad, that what he's doing is bad. And it's going to be the most difficult thing to sell.
Here's a good way to explain it. No, just if I may, here's a good way to explain it. Look at what happened, and I hate to go back to this, January 6th. Look at the people who have been prosecuted for doing, for trying to do what they thought he said and stop the steal, stop the electors.
The Leviathan,
Trump, as soon as it was inconvenient for him to support them, dumped them. Because it would have hurt him. It's nothing outside of Trump, nothing but Trump, and nothing against Trump. And as soon as you became a liability to him, he ditched you. He jettisoned you outside, and he is not going to support you at all. And this carries on politically too. So what I would tell the American people is, hey, Trump is not your friend. Trump will only do what it is that you think he will help you if it benefits him. As soon as it doesn't, he will ditch any morals, any promises he's made. You cannot trust that man.
My contention with this entire premise is that the loyal MAGA people, that when Trump told them to go peacefully and respect the police and everything, they decided to go, no, fuck you, we're rioting and we're going in.
No.
That's not how it
happened.
That just happens to magically, they interpreted some wacky shit instead of just following what he told them.
No. So this is...
Well,
Yeah,
I want
sorry,
Rashad,
go ahead, 'cause
first.
I have
Let's
Rick.
stop
Yeah,
real
I mean,
quick. I want to give
even in
Rashad
the
a chance, and
absence-
then we go with Connor.
Yeah, even in the absence of Trump directly telling them, okay, it's real shit, we're going to go in there, we're going to physically take the vote. I mean, his behavior when it happened is reflective of someone who was like, you know, I'm not going to tell you to do that, but if you do, I'd be more than happy to take advantage of the situation, call legislators, basically mafia boss my way into possibly being the president again. I think that is indicative of his fascistic nature. And if I were to, to talk to a Trump supporter and try to get them to see things, I definitely wouldn't use buzzwords like racist or fascist, but I would pull up his actions. Like, even in the absence of directing his supporters to be violent, he took advantage of the situation and basically like browbeat his own vice president and basically, tried to bully his way into being president again and take advantage of the violence. When everyone's asking him, please do something, he's basically weighing his options. What can I do from this situation?
So who here has actually seen the footage from January 6th and how the rioting started?
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say. I don't agree with this assessment that like everybody was going to storm the Capitol instantaneously when they showed up. What happened was they fucking showed up. They started beefing with cops. They were there to stop the steal, et cetera, et cetera. Shit gets hot. Like, dude, you can explain it if you want, but maybe for the audience. But for me, if you're going to explain to me the way that a rowdy crowd can get antagonized by law enforcement and vice versa, and then it can turn into a fucking riot, I'm already with you.
Yeah. So that's the issue, is that some people don't know. I sent this to Wick a while ago, but it's a long series of videos that are synced up. Basically, what happened is that when Ray Epps, which I'm not even going to get into his stuff, he was near the first breach of the barrier, which is way the fuck in front of the Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
Everybody moved forward. The police moved back to their secondary line, whatever. But at that point, everything just chilled the fuck out until the police said, "No, we gotta get these people back away from this secondary line. We need to move them back." And then they started firing tear gas and rubber bullets into people's faces for like 20 minutes until people just got pissed off enough and started rioting.
Yeah. So here's my counter argument to this. When it comes to rhetoric, I try to just tell you what's between my ears. Okay. I think the words, I say it. Okay. There are other people who use rhetoric in order to get desired outcomes out of people. And I think that if you look at Trump's rhetoric, whether it could be his TV show, it could be in sales, it could be real estate, whatever, you can find dozens of examples where he's not speaking to literal truth. He's speaking to intended effect. So if you tell people for 6 months that the republic is dying, this is the last chance for America, they stole the presidency from me, the FBI is corrupt, these institutions, I could keep going, but you're nodding yes. You're leading them up to the precipice of believing that it's not Donald Trump who is lying and being a fucking fraudster and an asshole for his own ends. You actually believe that the republic is so rotted to its core that it can only be restored by a man like Trump. And this is where it's fucking Caesar, it's Napoleon. This is like 1-to-1. And so the reason why Trump wasn't able to do what Caesar or Napoleon were able to do was because he didn't have the backing of the military. He had the backing of only half of the oligarchy. And honestly, it was probably only a third of the oligarchy because the oligarchy profits from the status quo. And then also when it came to the Republicans, Republicans will fight to restore the republic, but part of that is law and order. They are not mindless animals and they are not ruthless savages. So when you send them in to fight cops, they might hit them with flags or fucking, tear gas them back or take a riot shield and hit somebody in the fucking face, but they're not going to like gouge their eyes out or fish hook them or murder them or some shit. So there's a limit to which Republicans will step up to and then back away from, because they know that once they cross that precipice of violence, there's no going back.
So the issue that you're going to run into is that from the footage that we could see that was released after the January 6th committee collapsed in on itself and we moved on, is that there was a large time frame where what was considered the rowdy, riotous crowd stopped rioting and didn't attack, didn't do anything but stand there and do exactly what Trump wanted to, like, claimed that he wanted to happen, which was peacefully. Yeah. So when we're talking about he led them up to the precipice and then pushed them into doing something, you're going to have to actually like sell the concept of, well, he magically, convinced them that they should start rioting again, and that the police firing at them wouldn't have changed it at all. They would have done it anyways.
So what I would say is, if we look at the rhetoric leading up to January 6th, I'm going to put this at 95.5 on Trump's side. It's his efforts, his rhetoric, all that shit to get people to the Capitol on that date in the tens of thousands to believe that everything was stolen. And then I can't tell you if there's a secret cabal of DC police who was like, hey, if we tear gas the Trump Republicans right now, they'll cause a riot and that'll make Trump look bad. I have no fucking idea. I don't think so. I think that cops are just, I just think cops are fucking jumpy and they do stupid shit sometimes.
Correct.
So stupid shit could be trying to take a few hundred police officers and control a crowd of 100,000 people
with active aggression,
pushing them back to a secondary location by firing rubber bullets and tear gas. That doesn't seem very smart.
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think that the cops were overconfident in their abilities to push back a crowd, and were hitting people, and they were. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you've all heard the saying: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Again, there was nothing Trump could do to make it happen, but he could set the scene. He could lead the horse to water. And as Connor says, over these months, that was him leading the horse to the water. He was setting it up. He was putting the pyre together. He couldn't strike the match himself. And that does give him some plausible deniability. But I think, again, in the context of everything else he says and does, right? As Rashad
it's 95.5 Trump.
Yeah, so, when Rashad says, like, his response to, will you accept the results of the election? And he says, we'll see, right? When you have all of this other a body of work of his statements, which you say, oh, he doesn't mean it. He's just saying it for the cameras to get press. I don't believe that. I think he actually means what he says.
So, okay, I want to bring this back to
or has a desired effect.
So I'm just going to say that it's more.
A couple things.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
First of all, I'm just going to make just an argument, and then I have a question. I think it's much more likely that Donald Trump did not intend for the crowd there to attack cops or to break into the Capitol. I think that anybody who takes a step back and looks at the situation has to really look at intents here. Does it make sense for Trump for a political benefit to get to have that happen, to have people break in after he had just for how many months campaigned on jobs, not mobs, how we're the party of law and order, how, we're not about attacking cops. We're not about this shit. And to break into the Capitol and to cause violence when he doesn't have the backing of a military for any kind of coup, when there's no suggested plan of a coup, when there's nothing there which would indicate that he would be able to jump in and take advantage of violence to seize the reins of government. Does that make more sense? Or does it make more sense that he gave a speech in which he said, hey, are republics in trouble? Go peacefully and protest, right? And go out there and yell and make your voices heard to hopefully convince people in the Capitol building to not certify the election. I think number two is probably a lot more reasonable, especially knowing what we know about how he had this planned. And the reason why this is important is because it just really sounds to me like a fucking conspiracy theory when you lay out both options and one is clearly the obvious answer, but for some reason people just no, he meant for there to be violence. He wanted there to be an invasion.
I want Rashad to
he wanted people to kick in the door. And then the other question, really quick, it's not really a question that needs a long answer. Connor, would you vote for Trump if he's the nominee versus Biden?
No.
Would you vote for Biden?
Maybe.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, Rashad, if you want to respond to that, and then I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mean to be redundant, but I'll ask the same thing again, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that Trump's actions during January 6th, how extreme it got, I think his actions during the actual violence and his hesitance to actually immediately stop it, and his almost, in my opinion, seeming desire to see, can I fully take advantage of this? I think that kind of nullifies his intent. And I could be wrong, that could be too big of a stretch, but I think that when shit goes down and your reaction to it, I think that is more of an indication of where his mind was in relation to the extremities of January 6th, more so than saying, well, he didn't tell them to. I think trying to take advantage of it is a bigger, sign of character than anything else. Because it's like, you see what's going on. There have been casualties to deaths. You know what's going on, and yet you seem to be perfectly fine with not only sitting back and watching, but also making moves while it's happening. You're calling people. You're trying to make plays as chaos. Probably the most embarrassing domestic moment ever in our nation's history. You're taking advantage of it.
Since
Maybe-
1865.
Civil War aside.
I think the Civil War tops
Civil
that.
War aside, but
But I would get
outside of the Civil War,
Civil War
like,
aside,
yeah, that was
Civil War
yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
Since 1865.
and then we also remember how FDR, put the Japanese people in camps. That's a whole different. But we can go.
Well,
Yeah.
what about the Trail of Tears, where we
Oh,
pushed
okay,
millions
yeah,
of people
sure.
to death?
Okay.
Or 9/11,
We
I
get
anyway,
it, we get it.
Outside of like
Well,
genocide.
no. This is important. This is important because I think what you just said was I think it's something you honestly believe, and I think it's something that's representative of what a lot of people believe is they perceive January 6th as being the worst thing in recent history, or maybe even all of American history. I've heard multiple people say that, and then people are like, "Well, what about this?" And they're like, "Yeah, well, okay, I guess that was worse." But the reason they say that first is I think you do somewhat have this in your head of you see January 6th as perhaps the worst thing. And this is the critical. This is the critical response. Donald Trump obviously wanted the protests to continue, but his actions don't demonstrate that he wanted violence to happen and that he wanted violence to continue. He tweeted twice, relatively early on, "Don't attack the cops," and he's saying, "Stay." He doesn't want to tell them to go home.
Yeah, they're on our
side
side.
or whatever. If he could have done it peacefully and taken over the country
Wick,
peacefully, he would have.
please.
But that's not the point. The violence isn't the point.
You guys are accusing him of attacking the Capitol.
No, but hold on.
Well, no, Rashad, then counter. Go ahead.
I completely concede that the Civil War and all of that, everything else is worse than January 6th.
Yeah.
But what I'm basically saying is, like, in terms of far more recent modern history, in terms of just how presidents behave themselves and how they conduct themselves, January 6th was like an unthinkable moment. It's like, there's no fucking way this is happening. And I think that it was probably, obviously outside of genocide and the Civil War, for a president to engage in that kind of behavior was just unthinkable and probably not the most embarrassing, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's just unthinkable for a president to ever try to take advantage of and manipulate.
So hold on. So there's a part here that I want to concede. Bush, in a lot of ways, acted within the purview of his presidency while still stretching lies and all that kind of shit, but not enough to be charged. So for instance, if you look at torture, if you look at WMDs in Iraq, if you look at Dick Cheney's relationships with Halliburton and all that kind of stuff, and it costs like 1 million lives.
Using Kuwaiti ambassadors' daughters to claim that the Iraqis were gassing their people under false pretenses.
Yeah. So when you look at the war on terror on a geopolitical stage, obviously that is way worse than January 6th, right? But what I would say is that did not threaten the continuation of the republic. And so since 1865, which was the last time the republic was threatened to be dissolved, which is a long time, by the way. What is it, 135 years, 155 years, something like that? So in 150 years, we haven't had something that threatened the ability of the republic to continue.
Okay.
So that's why it's important. I'm not saying like 9/11 wasn't more fucked up, or World War II wasn't more fucked up, or the Japanese internment wasn't more fucked up. Obviously, right? So I'm just saying we don't know of another president who literally said, "I know that I lost, but I'm gonna pretend I won."
He didn't say
you.
that.
No, he didn't. But all the adults around him told him, you fucking lost. We interviewed all the shit. We investigated all the shit that you were fucking talking about.
All right, so I understand there were people who did tell him that he lost. There's no evidence
repeatedly.
He has. There's nothing from him indicating that he doesn't think that he won. He obviously thinks that he won. Even
that makes him retarded.
Even the leaked. Okay, so is he retarded or is he fascist? Right?
I don't understand why.
Why not both?
So, well, the reason is because you keep talking about focusing on his intent, right? And even the leaked phone calls, like all of his rhetoric and the words he's saying, indicate that he genuinely believes that the election was stolen from him. Even in the leaked secret phone calls, if he thought that he lost, then even in the private shit, maybe he would have indicated that. But no, he thinks that he won. And so, given that context, like when he's telling protesters to go peacefully, why do people, and this is important because the Colorado Supreme Court based a significant portion of their decision off this perception, why do people believe that he was inciting the violence that happened there? That he was he was responsible and that he wanted people to actually engage in violence when he told them to be peaceful?
I want to address half of that because I don't want to take on the burden of the other half.
Yeah.
I don't care if he intended it to be violent or intended it to not be violent. What I care about is the peaceful transfer of power. He could we could fucking have 10 cops lined up on Capitol Hill, and just as like an Aztec tradition, we could sacrifice them to the fucking sun god. But as long as there's a peaceful transfer of power, I don't really give a fuck.
This is where me and Connor part ways.
Hold on. No, hold on. There was a more important point that I wanted to address. Okay. So the more important thing that you asked me was, we don't know whether or not Trump really understood that he did not win. But in that call, you have the attorney general or whoever the fuck it is from the state of Georgia saying, no, we talked to your people. We showed them the evidence. These are the counter explanations for what you believe. The remaining discrepancies are not enough for you to win. And at this point, they didn't say this, but I could tell how fucking heated they were getting. They were basically saying, at this point, you're calling us fucking liars, and we're not lying. This is the facts on the ground. And then the attorney general and the assistant attorney general, so the feds went to him, and they said that we looked at XYZ, ABC, all of this is bullshit. Gianni, I think he had to pay out $150 million or $250 million. It was some obscene fucking dollar amount.
Which in of itself is fucked up, and I think indicative of a problem.
Why? If he knowingly said that it was fucking fraud, and he had cop after cop after cop after cop saying, this isn't true. We checked it out. It is bullshit. Don't fucking say that shit. And he chooses to say it anyways.
Okay, so I want to point out to you that...
Wait. Hold on. You don't have any kind of First Amendment concerns here when we what we've been seeing recently, especially where people are getting hit with fucking hundreds of millions of dollars of judgments for defamation cases regarding right now Trump is being hit with a defamation case for literally saying that he didn't commit a crime.
What about the definition of Dominion voting?
Because he also called her
so people can't defend themselves in their own case anymore.
Say this shit. It does affect people's bottom line. These words don't just exist in a vacuum; they have consequences. When you have the president and Rudy Giuliani saying I gotta address these people have stolen the election from you, that affects people's personal lives, and I think that's part of why he had that settlement is because it's affecting people's personal lives.
It was a judgment. It was a judgment. It wasn't a settlement.
Blackwood, I see your frustration, and I want to address it specifically. Okay, so when it comes to the Georgia case, it's because Gianni, after being consulted by law enforcement, so he should know better, he continued to repeat the specific names of the 2 Georgia poll station workers, saying that they committed fraud, after he should have known that it wasn't the case. And then if he wanted to say alleged, pending investigation, we don't know, or we're still really interested about this situation, those are all things that you wouldn't get sued for. But that's not what he said. He said that these 2 women committed voter fraud repeatedly. And he did so after he knew that he was causing them damage, and he should have good faith to not be saying that shit. When it comes to Trump, he's not being punished for saying, I didn't rape that woman. What he's being punished punished for saying is that she's a fucking lying skank that I never met before in my entire fucking life. She's a piece of fucking shit. She's a clout hungry fucking goblin, and she can suck a fucking dick. You don't need that shit in order to say
that's not the basis. That's not the basis.
It is the basis.
No. The basis for him getting sued is that he denied sexually assaulting her, and then because he was found guilty, then now what he said was a lie. By defending himself, it was a lie.
No,
think of the ramifications.
Look
Look it up. This is literally what's happening.
I'm familiar with the case.
Think of the ramifications of people who could, like, we're going to start setting this standard that we're going to start building up of you try to defend yourself. Like, I didn't do that. Well, a jury found that you did, and now we're going to tack on defamation whenever you deny that you did a crime.
The first thing was defamation, if I remember correctly. The first judgment was defamation.
No. The first judgment was sexual assault. They said they said that Trump fingered this chick in like a dressing room in a mall somewhere. Okay, that's what they said, and he denied that he did it. He said, "I didn't do that. He said he never met the person. I never did this." And then the basis for the defamation suit is that he denied sexually assaulting her when a jury found that he did. So think about the precedent that this is like leading into. You defend yourself from a criminal allegation, and then the jury finds that you did it. Now they're going to hit you on top of that with defamation. And my major problem with the Giuliani one is, first of all, defamation, I think, should be very carefully applied given First Amendment.
I'm pretty sure we have some of the strongest, I'm pretty sure we have some of the best fucking defamation and libel shit.
Keep in mind, Trump wants to destroy those laws. Trump wants to make it easier to sue people for defamation. This is a thing he wants.
I know he sued Bill Maher several times, and
he wants to. This is what he said,
as he should have, and he should have, and he lost. And he should have.
Can I ask a question here?
I want to finish Lactoid's point. I want to hear what he said.
Lactoid, finish your point.
Right. So not only is that fucked up that's happening to him now, but the $148 million. Okay, let's think about this for a second. So we're already talking about something that I want to treat with like with kid gloves, right? Because generally people, if they genuinely believe something, they should be able to say it, because if we remove that ability, boom, we've criminalized all religion, right? We just can't fucking have that in this country. So when this idea of Rudy Giuliani, maybe he believes that the election was fucking stolen, and he's saying, yes, I believe the election was stolen, and these are the people that are in charge here, the government officials that are in charge of XYZ. So like they did it, and $148 million? You think they've been harmed worth $148 million? How much do they fucking make per year?
Okay, so I'm just going to say this because I would have to look up more information in order to counter effectively what you're saying. But what I would say is, consistently, whenever I've been pointed out irregularities in a court case, whenever I've been told that judgments are insane, convictions are insane, charges are insane, this narrative doesn't add up, et cetera, et cetera. Derek Chauvin is an example of this, by the way. When I look into the facts of the matter, there's almost always extenuating circumstances. So for instance, when it comes to Trump fingering this lady in the stall or whatever, if she immediately went and told her therapists and her friends, and they had corroborative evidence, and they had notes that were carbon dated back to the fucking year or some shit. I don't fucking know how they established rape from 30 years ago. I'm assuming it's pretty hard.
They didn't have a time, or date or year when it happened. They just said
sure,
that
they had a year.
No. It was in the case that they couldn't determine a day or year when this happened. She could only say that she remembers it happening.
I'll make my general point instead of arguing this.
Yeah. Good.
Almost every time when I look into one of these fucking cases, I find extra variables and extenuating circumstances. And sorry, I just want to say this real quick because it's actually really important.
Yep.
Tim Pool is a master of this. Okay. There is a topic that I will intimately fucking study, and Tim Pool will cite facts from the thing that I've intimately studied, but he will cherry pick the cream of the crop of the facts that fit within the narrative frame that he wants to set. And then he doesn't tell you any of the contradicting evidence or any of the evidence that would make the picture less clear. And so when you tell me like, hey, I got this variable, I got this variable, I got this variable, I'm kind of telling you, I got to read it first. I'm not just going to concede that instantaneously.
This is fair, because I think this is what people do often with the political opponents, especially Trump. The Georgia phone call where they clipped a particular thing, Daniel Penny where they clipped specific footage, Kyle Rittenhouse. Like, of course, people are going to clip and chip and pull specific.
Kyle Rittenhouse is a beautiful example of taking facts to fit it to vilify somebody.
Right.
Yeah, and I actually think that case is also indicative of a larger problem in the country. But
No,
the fact that was
look,
even taken to trial. But
I don't
but
disagree with you, Lactoid, that there's a large problem with people doing that. We're talking about Trump
Yeah,
specifically, though. Is it happening with Trump? I don't think it is.
All we're discussing right now is I've made like a claim. Connor says he needs to look more into it, which is before he renders an opinion, which is totally fine. When you look into that, come back to me. All I'm saying is that the same frustration that you're having with Tim Pool, I'm having with people who I feel as though a little bit have TDS, right? Like when Trump was banned from Colorado, when he was taken off the Colorado ballot, every like fucking clockwork, every one of these fucking like late night TV hosts all gone at the same time, and they were like, Trump can't be on the ballot in Colorado, and the whole audience all started screaming and clapping. And at no point did he give any kind of legal analysis justifying why they just pulled Trump off the ballot. The people were so just fucking happy that Trump was off the ballot because that's all they care about. They don't give a fuck about the Republic. They don't give a fuck about like these deeper elements of like caring about the United States. Like they literally, two things. I really want to bring this up because they don't give a fuck about this because they cheer, right, whenever Trump is pulled off a ballot just because they hate him. And more critically, the Democrats don't give a fuck either because what did they do in the fucking midterms? They funded those MAGA Republicans because they thought they had a better chance of beating them in the general election. So on one hand, they're speaking out both sides of their mouth. The Democratic Party, the fucking establishment Democratic Party, on one hand is saying, yes, like MAGA Republicans are terrible. We have to come together. This goes beyond politics. This is critically important. And then they shovel money into the very people that they're condemning, the MAGA Republicans, because they want them to win the primary so they can run against them in the general. Okay. They don't give a fuck about any of these deeper principles.
Sure. Sorry, go ahead, Rashad, but I do want to address that afterwards.
Yeah, I would agree that TDS is absolutely horrible. I mean, like, just immediately jumping for joy. Yeah, a presidential candidate who a lot of people are riding on is possibly not going to be able to run. This is amazing. I agree that TDS is definitely a problem. But my argument to you would be like, what benefit, like, is Trump's behavior and actions and his words, like, of what benefit is he to the American people, even if we were to have this long-winded discussion about, Trump's behavior and what he's done? Is him becoming president of benefit to this country? Is his rhetoric not fascistic? Is it not, like, what are you trying to say? Like, are you saying that his behavior and rhetoric and his actions would be conducive to, like, a better America if he were to win?
No, here's what I'm saying. I've never voted for Trump. Okay, I've never voted for Trump in my life. The last two times I voted third party, and I think the fucking MAGA sycophants. The poll that freaks me out the most is the one where like a significant amount of Republicans trust Trump more than their own family members. That's kind of fucked up in of itself, and I'm surprised no one else here has pointed to that because that's probably a pretty strong argument on your side. It's funny on one end, but it's also a little bit fucked up. Okay, but here's what I'm saying. Like, if you wanted to point out, like, Trump is like appeals to people's nationalism, and he tends to be more right wing on certain issues than Biden, and XYZ and XYZ. I don't think that he's a good fit for the country because of XYZ. Like, that's fine. I get triggered about the label of he is fascistic. That's what I get triggered about.
You know what I hate personally? I hate when those motherfuckers who are cheering, right, when Hitler is taken out, right? But they are doing bad things too. Or why don't we look at those bad things that they're doing too? Look at the bad things over here. Let's not ignore. Let's ignore these bad things. Let's ignore these bad things. I'm sorry,
comparing him to Hitler. I knew it.
But do you see what I'm saying? It's like this whole distraction, right? I agree with you. I agree with you that the people who are doing this are bad. Like, the people who are just making power plays are bad, that it's corrupt, that we need to get rid of it. I condemn that. I condemn the people. You're not talking to Josiah here. You're not talking to Pondering Politics. You're talking to Wick, okay? And Wick doesn't play that game.
Do you condemn the Democratic Party for supporting fascists?
Yes.
Do you condemn the Hamas wing of the
I was against them funneling money into these weird MAGA things just as a play because I thought, like, it was just wrong. We shouldn't support things we don't support, right? Like, I'm with you on that. But that does not excuse the actions that Trump's taken and the actions that he says he will take in the future if he wins the presidency. I think that we cannot conflate these things. They are massively different.
There's an important thing here that I want to address before we move on. So, Lactoid, I share your frustration. And if anything, I get more frustrated with liberals and progressives who cheer on the death of due process. One, because I think due process is all that's really holding back conservatives from fucking killing Democrats, frankly, because they're a bunch of fucking limp-wristed. Yeah, they're a bunch of fucking limp-wristed, fucking soy-chugging, fucking... all I have is
McConnell is slurs. Fucking genius.
But anyways,
don't go into like TOS words, okay?
Right. So I'll stop it there. So liberals and Democrats and progressives, they don't understand that the rule of law and the Republican standard is actually what's saving them from the wrath of insane fucking conservative retards, right?
Yeah.
But and then another thing that's more frustrating is that liberals and progressives think that they are smarter than their fucking retarded cousin at Thanksgiving who's a diehard MAGA Republican, right? But they're also so uncaring and unthinking in their principles that they will clap like lemmings when a fucking former SNL host walks out onto his shitty fucking show and says, hey, we killed a part of due process that advocates for our general political alignment. That to me, it's just as lemming and just as stupid and just as dangerous as Trump cultists. So, but for me, when you use the word Democrat and you say the word demos, you're basically telling me that you want the popular will of the people. You want the will of the majority to prevail. If Socrates is a danger to the youth of Athens and 51 out of 100 members vote to poison him to death, then you got to kill Socrates because that's the will of the people. Whereas what a republic would say is that you cannot compel a person to suicide. So that's where, for me, regardless of what happens, this entire republic could fucking collapse. Fascism could reign, communism could reign, whatever. I'm going to remain a Republican principally for the rest of my fucking life. And I wish people did care about the principles, because the truth is the world would be a better place.
Just a point on that. There's some weird contradictions that happen sometimes where, you know, we're looking at the roots of the words, but like there are some instances in which the Republican Party is just more democratic than the Democratic Party, right? So I think, especially in its internal functioning.
DNC shit.
Yeah, the DNC shit, right?
The Denver Wasserman Schultz 2016 contract they had to filter out all of the press statements and stuff.
Well, not only that, but like
passing Hillary Clinton the fucking notes, all the interviews before they fucking happened.
But also the super delegates, right? So like in the Republican Party, there was no and is no system. Like it's a very democratic system in which like you have like you got to win like XYZ elections or caucuses, and then you get the primary. That's part of the reason why the establishment like hated Trump and they wanted to stop him, but they couldn't because of the way the party works. But the Democratic Party, I mean, there are super delegates who Bernie Sanders won the election in their area, and they said, "Fuck it, we're going to vote for Hillary anyway."
Yeah, they just moved him to round 2 this time around.
Look, I agree with you. The DNC needs reformed, but I think this is beside the point.
It's fascist. It's fascist. Wick.
We are over time.
The DNC is a fascist party. It's full of fascists. What do you think?
We are over time, right? We have run the gamut on this, and I want to thank all of you and to my audience for coming. Gang, if you like this kind of content, if you enjoy what we're doing here, right, then what you can do to support me is to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on Kick or Twitch, hit that follow button. Gift subs, super chats. I appreciate the ones I have gotten. Bits, throw bits, all these things help support me. I can't do this for free. You got to keep supporting me. Also, in addition, remember, February from the 9th till 11th in Ohio, we are going to be doing canvassing, right? So if you believe in electoralism and you want to support the Democratic Party, some of you won't, right? I understand, right? But if you want to support, right, beating Trump in Ohio, right, on the 9th till 11th, we're hosting, again, a canvassing house. I will be putting stuff and links to that in my Discord. !Discord and chat. Click the link, accept the rules. You can join the Discord. You can check that out. And next week, Wednesday, we're going to be having some of the organizers from the Canvassing House coming onto my show to talk about the importance of canvassing. So that'll be fun. But I want to give each of these individuals a chance to have an outro to tell people where you can find them, because they've all been great tonight. I've really appreciated the spirit of the discussion. The robust arguments that have been featured here, and I really enjoyed this, and thank you again for coming. So we're going to start in the reverse order we started. We're going to start with counterpoints, and then we're going to end with our friend Rashad. Counterpoints, go ahead, what you got?
Yeah, my name is Connor. 95% of my channel views are Warhammer 40k. So if you're into science fiction, science fantasy, gritty, grim, dark violence, if you like genetically engineered transhuman space warriors slaughtering the shit out of aliens and being unapologetic about it, then just type in Counterpoints 40k into your search bar on YouTube and you'll find it. Please subscribe. Check out all the content. We're redoing a whole bunch of old content and it's fantastic. I really do love that part of my online presence. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so at Counter Connor, counter common spelling, Connor, Conor. And then also, we do live streams like this. So I love debating. I love the Twitch and YouTube political space. This is my home. My only regret is that I don't have more time to dedicate to it. So please give me money. Please be a patron or give me super chats or whatever, because the faster that I get more money, the faster I can go full time. The faster I can go full time, the faster I can hang out with you fine folk more. So thank you for having me, Wick. And it was beautiful and pleasant and heated and fantastic with all of you as well.
Thanks for being here. Check them out, gang. We want to be able to get them on in my normal time, right? Like we had to schedule this at 8 specifically for Counterpoints, right? But I'd like to keep doing things at 6 if I can. So yeah, give them money too. And thank you, Temperance Quill and only Mr. Bill for the money. I really appreciate you. And yes, you can react to the stream. I give you permission. It's fine. Lactoid, go ahead.
Yeah, if you like what I had to say, you can find me at WhickTV. The last thing or on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Last thing I wanted to say is just I think the court part is the most critical element here. The Supreme Court that was primarily appointed by Trump, people have been railing on for being conservative, but when you actually look at all their rulings, they're very principled, consistent. They come from originalist and textualist thinkings, and they are the opposite of fascism. And unfortunately, if you care about having an actual separation of powers and an American system, you need to support a candidate that will put more of those kind of justices into the Supreme Court. So if you live in a swing state, don't vote for Biden. Sorry, Wick. If you vote, I don't care who you vote for, just don't vote for Biden. If you don't live in a swing state, do whatever you want. I don't care.
Check him out, gang. Blackhood's great. Blackhood's fun. Give him a follow. I really appreciate him. We fight a lot, right? We disagree on a lot, but I like him because he's genuine and he's honest and he's principled, and I appreciate that. Next, Artemis Fowl. Go ahead.
I don't make content. I don't have a channel. You can find me if you look, but I'm not going to tell you where. My biggest thing is I don't vote. The last person I voted for was Obama. It doesn't matter who's in power. I'm a government contractor. I'm always going to come out on top. The one thing I like to watch is how political organizations and their strategies to win are. And for right now, I'm telling the DNC and the Democratic Party don't change because what you're doing is fucking retarded. Nothing that you're selling, nothing that you're arguing is convincing anybody. January 6th wouldn't even matter if the police hadn't been shooting people in the face with tear gas and then shooting themselves with tear gas because the wind was blowing directly in their faces, causing them to retreat. Nobody gives a shit about the fake elector slate. The only thing they actually care about is the rioting. And so when you make an argument that the real important part about January 6th was the slate, you're losing people. You're losing the average person. So keep going. I'm pretty sure if you keep going like this and trying to make Trump into a martyr, it's definitely not going to make him more popular in the end.
Artemis, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your perspective. It's really great. I disagree with you on this. I do agree that we need to change some things, right? I think we need to go in a different direction as a Democratic Party to convince people. But that's what I'm trying to do, is have these discussions. We'll see in the end of the day. Last, but certainly not least, Rashad, go ahead.
But yeah, I definitely want to concede the point that January 6th was the most embarrassing domestic moment. That I misspoke there 100%. 100% distance myself from that because I was so wrong. You can find me at Rashad Crenshaw on YouTube. I make classic liberal content and shit like that. I swear to God, I don't have TDS, so you won't catch it clicking on my channel. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to be on here. I've watched basically I've seen almost all you guys before on Destiny and stuff like that. So good to be here. Thank you all of you chat and everyone for having me. Really humble to be here.
No, thanks again. I hope you'll come back. Gang, next week we got no show tomorrow, by the way, but next week we got some great shows. Monday we're going to be talking about mental health. Tuesday is going to be call-ins. I'm not sure with who yet. Wednesday is the canvassing and talking about electoralism. And then Thursday, we're going to be having a debate on the Houthi strikes. I'm still setting it up, so if you, dear viewer, or any of you want to opine on whether or not Biden was justified in striking against the Houthis, or if it was a overreach, he shouldn't have done that, it was an escalation, please reach out. Kevin Logan's our only committed guest at this particular moment,
You
but
want me to show up?
I'm sure there will be more as we
You want
go.
me to show up for that?
But for now, I want to bid thee all adieu. Who's still streaming? Any of you guys streaming on Twitch or anything I read into, or are you?
I'm gonna go read chat and braid out myself.
Do you think? What about you, Lacto? Are you going to stream for a while? Or are you done?
I'm probably going to be done in a bit.
Okay, we're gonna go to let's see who's. You know what? Let's go to Prunk Guy.
All right. Parasocial love. Catch you guys.
Yeah. See you guys later. Wait. Bye bye. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.